bespoke radio for the masses.
Headline edition, July 8, 1947. The Army Air Forces has announced that a flying disc has been found and is now in the possession of the Army.
If the game is rigged, change the game. Game changer.
I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world.
This is Fade to Black with your host, Jimmy Church, on the Game Changer Radio Network and KGRA, the Global Radio Alliance.
I need your help to get to the year 1985.
You're listening to Fade to Black with Jimmy Church on the Game Changer Network.
Well. How you doing? How you doing? I already know. It's Fade to Black, bespoke radio for the masses. Today's Thursday, June 23rd, 175 days into the new year. 191 days left. As always, we are live from a bunker somewhere in downtown Burbank, California. And I would like to welcome everybody listening all around the world, all across the United States. Hither and thither, to and fro, back and forth, up and down, east and west, north and south, far and near. This is Fade to Black. For KJCR, the Game Changer Network, and KGRA, the Planet, I am your oh-so-humble host, Jimmy Church. All right, tonight we have a very special presentation with the director of the Zeitgeist films. Peter Joseph is here. Man started a movement. We're going to talk about all of that tonight with Mr. Peter Joseph. And first up, Jon Rappoport with his No More Fake Newsroom. It's going to be a tight show. It's going to be a special broadcast. It's one of those things. No Fader night tonight. What a week we've had. And next week, we're going to move Fader night up to Wednesday so everybody can just relax, okay? The next Thursday night, we're going to be airborne on our way out to Roswell, New Mexico. You can follow us on Twitter at JChurchRadio, Facebook, YouTube. You know what to do. Just go over to Jimmy Church Radio, click follow, like, and subscribe. You can also email throughout the show tonight, Jimmy@JimmyChurchRadio.com. Yes, I know Twitter's got issues with our hashtag F2B. And it has been restarting all night. Just hashtag F2B. So there's something going on with it. And it's my guess that Twitter is doing some filtering on the back end that has nothing to do with us. But mine is restarted now 4 times in the last 15 minutes and repopulated. But now it looks like it's hopping right along. They realize that we don't bite. Okay, it seems to be cool. So if you are having problems with it when you open it up, just realize it will kick in. All right? Let's do this. I'm fired up. Jon Rappoport and Peter Joseph tonight. And it's going to be cool. It's going to be great. Now, really quick, I want to get our sponsors out of the way because they are so important, and I do it at the beginning of every show. Please support the show. Everybody wants to know how to support Fade to Black. Well, you do that through our sponsors. All of the advertising that you hear that we run throughout the show, go visit their websites. Go and do that. That's how you support the show. And our big sponsors, obviously, are National Tax Experts, Life Change Tea, and you can go to their website. Just click on the banner right there, which is getthetea.com. Use the promo code Jimmy. It's one of the great companies on the planet. And Studio Dome. Go to Studio Dome. Purchase their stereo system. It's 2 Bluetooth speakers for $129. Very simple. So the best deal on the net. JCRTWS is the promo code there that you use in checkout. And that is 60% off, $129. And that includes free shipping and a hard shell case. Best deal on the net. Our events for this summer, the Roswell Festival, which is June 30th through July 3rd in Roswell, New Mexico. And we will be broadcasting from the Roswell Museum on Friday night. I just found out today that Race Hobbs is going to be there, too, as well, with the KGRA crew. So there you go. All right, so come on down and hang out with all of us. We're going to be there at Roswell next week. We take off, I think, everybody in the country that is going to be there, race included. We're all leaving Thursday night, Thursday afternoon, getting there Thursday night. And, the funny thing is there's an airport in Roswell. We all know that, right? But to fly in there is horribly expensive. So we've actually got to go into Albuquerque and then hop into a rental and drive in. So after we fly, we have to drive for a couple hours into Roswell. But we get to see New Mexico, right? So that's everybody's packing up, heading out Roswell next week, going to the motherland. I'm very excited about this. And then right after that, the Awareness Life Expo. Let me back up here. Then right after that, we come back into town. And then that week, I'm over at Coast to Coast for the entire weekend. And so there you go. The foot never comes off the gas, does it? And then right after that is the Awareness Life Expo, which is August 12th, 13th, and 14th up at the Crowne Plaza Hotel in Sacramento, California. And we're going to broadcast from there Friday night at a private VIP shindig. Okay, that's Friday night. Now go and get your tickets and your info, Crowne Plaza Hotel, over at jimmychurchradio.com. With that, let's get this show cracking. Today, Glenn Danzig is 61. And that's when you ask yourself, where has all the time gone? When Glenn Danzig cranks it up to be 61 years old. Wow. Our dead guy's birthday today is, and this is somebody that I talk about a lot on the show. And today's his birthday. Alan Turing, 1912 to 1954, died at the age of 41. Mathematician who devised a test of artificial intelligence and created an early model of the general-purpose computer. During World War II, he did code breaking for the British Army and developed several techniques for breaking German ciphers. And to most, and to me, Turing is widely considered to be the father of theoretical computer science and artificial intelligence. He was a genius. Turing was prosecuted in 1952 for homosexual acts, which was still a criminal act in the UK at that time. He accepted chemical castration as an alternative to prison. Yeah, they messed with him bad. And he ended up dying in 1954, 16 days before his 42nd birthday, committing suicide from cyanide poisoning. And Alan, you helped win the war, brother. And you were such an important man. This system that I'm speaking to the world on right now would not have been possible if it wasn't for you. And there you go. You got messed with. And to this day, we're all so sorry for all of that. All right. Happy birthday, Alan Turing. On this day in history, I just tweeted this out. In 1987, Tiffany kicks off her career with a live performance in Paramus Park Mall in Paramus, New Jersey. And a career was born in the shopping malls across America. Happy birthday. Happy on this day in history, Tiffany. Yeah, I had to do it. I just had to. You guys enjoy that picture? Let me go back and look at this. Look at that pic, man. That pic was in my office over at HHB back in, I'm going to say 2001, right in there, 2001. There you go, Tiffany. Fate or fact, the longest spacewalk ever lasted almost 9 hours in a spacesuit without radiation protection. All right. Tonight is a very special presentation, everybody. We do have the director of the Zeitgeist films, Peter Joseph, is here. We're going to discuss his life and what the Zeitgeist movement is doing today. It's just going to be one of those conversations tonight. But first up, of course, Jon Rappoport is going to be here with his No More Fake Newsroom in just a few short minutes. All right, and I was thinking today, and I know I've shared this story before, but I'm going to repeat it because Peter's on the show tonight, and I don't want to take up time with Peter with this story. But Rita, back in 2007, Rita comes home from work one night, and she goes, there's this film out called Zeitgeist. And I said, okay. And it's so rowdy. It's illegal to watch. That was the vibe behind Zeitgeist, right? I'm like, well, where is it? Well, I'm going to get the DVD next week, but we can only have it for a day, and then we have to return it. I'm like, what is this movie about? It's about the government and the world and the Illuminati and religion. I'm like, what? Freaks me out. Just freaks me out, and she comes home the next day. Do you have that DVD? What was it called? It's called Zeitgeist. No, I don't have it yet. And I'm freaking, and I try to find out about it. And there was a little bit at the time on the net, just a little. And all of it saying the same thing, mentioning, conspiracy theories and 9/11 and the Federal Reserve and religion. And I'm like, wow, okay, all right. There was a little bit out there, but not much, which to me was freaking me out a little bit more. It was hard to get information on it. So a few days go by, and then one day her car screeches into the driveway. She comes running in. I got it. You got what? Zeitgeist. Really? And she hands it to me, and I'm holding it in my hand, and I'm out of my mind, people. I'm freaked out. And I'm holding yeah, Rita. I'm holding it in my hand, and it's almost like I'm holding kryptonite, that I'm not allowed to watch this. It's like that film Faces of Death. Remember that? That it's like illegal. It's not rated X. It's not XXX. This is off the chart rated X. And we sit down and we pop it in. And I don't know if this thing is going to send out secret code, to the NSA. The CIA is going to be knocking at my door. I'm freaking out. And we watch it. And the first 10 minutes of the film, which deals with the first parts of religion, but that first 10 minutes was an eye-opener. And what that film ended up ultimately causing me to do was a lot of research, because it touched upon some things. It set the tone with the religion aspects at the beginning of the film. And some of it we have heard before, the rumors of it before. Some of it is there. The stuff about Horus but I went back, Jesus being born, and Buddha and all of these other religious leaders and icons around the world in different cultures, all, were born on December 25th from a a mother, immaculate conception, who was a virgin, and I was like, no, this can't. So you go and you start checking into this, and you're finding out that some of it is true. And for me, it caused weeks of research. I jumped into every aspect of it. The stuff about the Federal Reserve that is presented in Zeitgeist, some of it we have heard before, but it was the way to tie it all together, and the visuals and Peter Joseph's narration was really cool and effective. But it was the pacing of it, and it was well done, tight edits, and I thought, I can see why people were freaked out about this. And then we had to give the DVD back, and that was the other thing. So I took a lot of notes and I did a lot of research, but I had to give the DVD back. We ended up getting another copy of it later. But Zeitgeist ultimately is a film that I have watched, I don't know, maybe 100 times, all of them, and the follow-ups, 2 and 3. But I go back and I watch Zeitgeist all the time. I watched all of the Zeitgeist debunked stuff. I watched that too, and I didn't think that was nearly as effective as Zeitgeist the film was. And I'm going to talk to Peter about this tonight, because one of the things that I started to read about Zeitgeist over the next year, which would have been like 2008 going into 2009, I didn't agree with. And it was really kind of funny, because I thought that in the debunking of Zeitgeist, that if somebody was going to go at it, that they would be able to back up and tear it apart, and I could calm down on a few of these issues. And to be quite honest, I think that the criticisms and the debunking of the film were not only ineffective. I mean, the Zeitgeist is more effective than the debunking is. But I think a lot of it was done out of jealousy and just hatred and anger. It had nothing to do with the factual stuff of, by attacking the film and saying, oh, this is just another conspiracy film, and trying to tie together the Federal Reserve to the cabal and the rich bankers. Well, you know what? Especially today in 2016, that's exactly what is going on. I agree with almost the entire film now, and research has shown, now that the film has been out for 10 years, that the film is basically correct. Now, that is Zeitgeist 1. Okay? And it has stood the test of time. That's my opinion. But what ultimately ended up happening because of Zeitgeist, and we're going to get into this tonight with Peter, is a movement started. The Zeitgeist Movement, TZM. And it went global. It went worldwide. Meetings in houses and homes and rooms across America and across the globe. And here we have a guy that is a percussionist, Peter Joseph. That's his thing, who happened to... we're going to talk to him about, I'm going to hear his version tonight, the real stuff, but created a performance piece that he wanted to try to capture into a film and ended up changing the world. That's what Zeitgeist ultimately did. Now, we'll find out from Peter. Was it an accident? Was it intentional? Why start something that you can't finish? Well, he's finishing it, but what I mean is, you don't know what the world is going to give you. You don't know what life is going to give you. But if you want an example of something that goes completely viral, I have no idea today how many tens of millions, if not 100 million or more people have seen Zeitgeist. That's an insane thought. And you just don't know when you put it out there. And his decisions to go into a different type of distribution system, one that was free. So it looks to me that Peter backed up what he is ultimately about. Because if he would have gone through the routes of normal monetization, he's a billionaire. But he did not. And he has stuck to his guns. And he has a very, very large organization that he has put together. He's got a lot of respect. But he was a percussionist. And we look at him as a filmmaker, as a guy that created a movement and a new way of a new money system and a new agricultural system and a new setup for society. But he's just a drummer. And now this responsibility, this enormous weight, has turned around and been placed on his shoulders, all because he made this little movie called Zeitgeist. And that's our guest tonight, Peter Joseph. And if you didn't know, everything that, now I'm going to say really quick, I might mention this to Peter in a little bit, but our good friend, Dan Zukowski, a couple of years ago, we were at breakfast and we started talking, and Zeitgeist comes up. And he goes, "Hey, man, well, Peter and I are friends." What? So it has taken almost 2 years to get tonight put together. Peter's a very busy man. He's got lots of stuff going on in his life and this show, and it does what it does. But we were able to finally synchronize life to get this day put together tonight. So when I say it's a special presentation, you need to understand what is behind it. And for me, what Zeitgeist personally meant to me, I'm not going to take 15 minutes of Peter's time tonight, or anybody's time, or your time, to share all of this with Peter. It doesn't matter. But you need to know why. When we say this is a special presentation, what is behind it and how we got it together. And some things are just meant to be. Very excited about tonight. Okay, in a few short minutes, Jon Rappoport is going to be here with his No More Fake newsroom. But before we do all of that, the big news. Led Zeppelin have won their copyright lawsuit that claimed that they had plagiarized the music to Stairway to Heaven. Los Angeles jury determined today that the lawyer representing the estate of late guitarist Randy Wolf, who played with the group Spirit, did not prove that the Hard Rockers lifted the song's intro from Spirit's 1968 instrumental Taurus. Wow. And I'm totally shocked with this. And it's not that I thought it was plagiarized. I kind of felt it was. I mean, they sound similar. But today I listened to a couple of other older songs out there, Cry Me a River being one, that also have the same lick in it. I mean, the same opening chords of Stairway to Heaven. So maybe Spirit got it from somebody else. But to hand this off to a jury, I had said yesterday that they didn't play the original version of Taurus. They didn't do that. They didn't play him back-to-back with Stairway to Heaven. And that, I thought, was a mistake. Or maybe that the judge wouldn't allow it. I still don't know. I've tried to find clarification on it. But to me, if you're just going to leave that into the hands of somebody and go, does this sound like this? They're going to go, yep, it sure does. But they didn't do it. Led Zeppelin prevailed. So there you go. That's a really big deal. Now, also, the reason why I'm a musician and the reason why this is a big deal is after there have been a few lawsuits that have popped up lately. I'm not going to get into that right now about this very issue. And once you open up the door, there's only so many notes. There's only so many ways to write and write melody and stuff. I mean, everything tends to be borrowed because you grow up learning and appreciating stuff, and you write in a certain way and you write in a certain style. So is everything plagiarized? And that it would go to great artists, painters and sculptors that learn their style because they appreciate somebody else. Well, you know what? Then everybody would be suing everybody. So maybe it's best that this happened the way that it did. And we can move on because it does open up a tremendous can of worms. All right, the other big news today, the Solar Impulse 2, a plane, that's right, powered entirely by the sun, made history today by landing in Spain following a 70-hour flight across the Atlantic. It flew nonstop from New York to Seville, and it was originally supposed to take 90 hours. It only took 70. Got a little tailwind action, I guess. Also, we are awaiting the British polls. Everybody, I think, by now has gone to the polls in Britain, and they're not going to announce the EU exit possibility until 7 a.m. tomorrow morning, British time. And I think we might get some announcements before the end of the show tonight. So we'll stay on top of that. And really quick, for those of you here in Southern California, a new UFO museum has opened, and it's called Encounters, the UFO Experience. Created by Brian Bouquet, a Ladera Ranch resident and a veteran of entertainment-oriented museums, put this thing together. And he covers everything, Area 51, Roswell, Rendlesham, I think Betty and Barney Hill. He's got this really cool exhibit done and put up. It's down on the Anaheim Garden Walk, right across the street from Disneyland. Okay, it spent 2 summers in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, and now it is here. It will be open here in Southern California through Labor Day. There you go. Very cool. All right, I'm going to get out of here. When I come back, Jon Rappoport will be joining us with his No More Fake newsroom. This is Fade to Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Tonight, Peter Joseph, Zeitgeist. This is truly bespoke radio for the masses on the Game Changer Network and KGRA, The Planet. I'll be right back.
You're listening to Jimmy Church, Fade to Black.
Fade to Black will now pause for alien identification.
The station that talks the net. KGRA Radio. What's up, revolutionaries? It's me, Jimmy Church. Do you have an IRS or state tax issue? Well, I did, and I called national tax experts. My problems were fixed, done, fini, and man, I got to tell you, it was a relief. National Tax Experts are a recognized tax office that services clients in all 50 states. It doesn't matter where you live. Give them a call. I'm telling you, they take the time to understand each and every client's individual financial status as well as their financial goals. And that's exactly what you need, my brother, when you're taking on the evil 3-letter. So, seriously. Give them a call today at 1-877-909-5444. Again, 1-877-909-5444. Or go check out their website, www.nattaxexperts.com. That's NATTAXEXPERTS.com. Tell them Jimmy sent you.
Hi, folks. Ronnie here reminding you that June is Health Awareness Month, sponsored by GetTheTea.com. Many of you have heard our tea commercial, maybe visited the website, but haven't committed because, well, you just don't know. Skeptical. We understand. Just to remind you, our tea is not just tea. In fact, very little tea. Life Change Tea is a unique blend of 8 different herbs, removing intruders that attack your health. You brew our tea to make the concentrate, you add water, and put in the fridge. 2 8-ounce glasses a day, and life will be good. Visit us at getthetea.com. That's getthetea.com. And this month is lots of fun stuff with Health Awareness Month. You could be picked and receive your order absolutely free. You never know. Read the testimonies and try our products. Log on to getthetea.com. That's getthetea.com. And for great health tips, visit my YouTube channel at Health Matters Now, where you can learn about health tips and how products work on your body. Join me, getthetea.com.
9 out of 10 geneticists agree.
Fade to Black is not your father's radio show on the Game Changer Radio Network and KGRA, The Planet.
Hi, this is Chase Klutsky with Fate Magazine Radio, and you're listening to Jimmy Church and Fade to Black on the Game Changer Network and the KGRA digital broadcast station, where the Fade or Nots rock.
Hi, this is Rob Reiner from Anvil, and you're listening to JimmyChurchRadio.com.
What's up? I'm Chris. What up? This is Kyle Massey. You're listening to Jimmy Church Radio.
And now, coming to you from the No More Fake newsroom in deep space, which is the space that we suspect to be true, that the world as it is fed every day by the Ministry of Truth is a lie, a false reality, a movie projected on the screen of our subconscious. This, however, is the breakout. All the screens crash. They all go down and we see the light of day. A new day. No more robots. No more androids. It's the No More Fake newsroom with Jon Rappoport. Take it away, John.
Thank you, Jimmy. Here we go, folks. What I thought I'd do tonight is I'm going to line up 6 or 7 gigantic, mind-boggling medical scandals that I've covered over the years. And some of these I've already reported on with Jimmy, but I want to line them up, like in a bowling alley, and just knock them down and feed them to you rapid fire to blow your mind. Because really, the medical universe is not what we think it is. It's not what we think it is at all. So that's what I'm going to do. Here we go. Starfield Report, July 26, 2000, Journal of the American Medical Association. Dr. Barbara Starfield from the Johns Hopkins School of Public Health reported the medical system kills in America 225,000 people a year directly through FDA-approved pharmaceutical drugs and mistreatment and error in hospitals. If you extrapolate that out to a decade, that is killing 2.25 million Americans per decade. Your medical system. Boom. Number 2, Peter Doshi, Dr. Peter Doshi. In 2005, in the British Medical Journal, decided to take a look at the number of flu deaths every year in the U.S., which had been touted by the Centers for Disease Control at 36,000. They kind of repeated this figure like robots every year. So what he discovered was 62,034 deaths from influenza plus pneumonia. This is the CDC's own data he's looking at here. And I was looking at it, too, at the same time. We were corresponding. So what he discovered was actually 61,777 deaths per year were from pneumonia. This is for the year 2001. And flu deaths for 2001, 257. And here's the payoff. Of those 257 flu deaths for the year 2001, in only 18 cases was the actual presence of the flu virus verified. Get it? So for the year 2001, they could really only verify 18 flu deaths in America, not 36,000. And so all of the hullabaloo and the massive warnings and the pleas and the whining and moaning and demands to get the flu vaccine because it's so dangerous, 18 confirmed flu deaths in the year 2001. Boom. Number 3. Again, Peter Doshi. This has to do with the diagnosis of flu. Every year in the U.S., hundreds of thousands of blood samples from likely flu patients or diagnosed flu patients are sent to labs for analysis. And of all of these, only 16% of the blood samples come back positive for the flu. That means that 84% of the most likely or diagnosed flu patients do not have the flu. They do not have the flu, 84%. So if you're talking about being a, solid believer in the flu vaccine, the overwhelming odds are that you don't have the flu, 84% to 16%. So maybe you think that the flu vaccine is actually miraculous. In other words, it's so great. It's not just safe and effective, but it's so fantastically great that it can prevent things that aren't even the flu. And if you believe that, then I've got some beautiful price condos on the dark side of the moon for sale. Boom. Number 3, covered this, I think it was last week, psychiatry. The entire galaxy of psychiatry is compressed into something called the DSM, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. Well, as it turns out, there are roughly 300 official certified mental disorders with labels and names and so on and so forth. However, there is no, listen closely, no defining physical test, diagnostic test of any kind for any of the so-called 300 mental disorders. No blood test, no urine test, no hair test, no brain scan, no genetic assay. Zilch, zero, nada. None of these so-called official 300 mental disorders has a defining diagnostic test of any kind. Now, if you can get away with something like that, you're really good. I mean, I've heard of cons before. Good cons, short cons, long cons, but this is right up there, right up there. The officially certified science of what is called mental disorders, mental health, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. No defining diagnostic test. And not only that, but the whole idea that these so-called mental disorders stem from chemical imbalance in the brain has been also shot down by Dr. Ronald Pies, Pies, who was the editor, is the editor emeritus of one of the top psychiatric magazines, who said this has always been an urban myth. This was never really true in the first place, that all these so-called disorders stem from a chemical imbalance in the brain. Really? Wow. So explain this. Why then do psychiatrists continue to prescribe endless amounts of, in parentheses, toxic drugs to patients, since all of those drugs are supposedly designed to eliminate a chemical imbalance in the brain? Boom. Next, and this relates to a couple of the prior items here that I explained. Sharyl Attkisson, star investigative reporter for CBS News, in the late summer, early fall of 2009, when the so-called swine flu epidemic was at its roaring height, and the CDC was claiming that there were somewhere, let's say, around 10,000 cases of swine flu in the U.S., and that's their job, by the way. The CDC is really a bean counter agency. They put out reports, endless reports, on how many cases of such and such disease, and this disease and that disease in the U.S., and how many deaths from each of those diseases. That's what they're supposed to do. Well, she discovered that in the summer of 2009, the CDC stopped counting cases of swine flu in America. Stopped counting them and didn't tell anybody that they stopped counting them. So being, a good reporter, really the only investigative reporter that I know of at CBS News, she decided to find out why. And this is what she discovered: that the blood samples from the most likely swine flu patients, or the diagnosed swine flu patients in America, the blood samples from these people that were being sent to labs all over the country were overwhelmingly coming back with no sign of swine flu or any other kind of flu. In other words, once again, the whole thing was a hoax perpetrated on the American people. And one of the reasons for perpetrating the hoax was, of course, to get people to take the swine flu vaccine. Hey, you got to take the vaccine. You got to take the vaccine, right? Okay. The capper on this wild tale is that about 3 weeks after Attkisson's story was published on the CBS News website, and by the way, she and her editor tried to get it onto the CBS Evening News, which is, the news broadcast, which is now anchored by Scott Pelley, who, this is Scott Pelley. Yes, this is the news. They tried to get that on, and it was shot down completely. Even though they had already published it on their website, somebody decided, we can't let a scandal like this out of the bag. This is too heavy, too big. The whole thing's a hoax. What? No. Why did we publish it in the first place? We will not show this on television. Okay, so about 3 weeks after the article is published on the CBS News website, the CDC announces their new estimate for the number of swine flu cases in the United States. Remember, they stopped counting, so they have no idea. But they're going to announce a new estimate, and the new estimate is 22 million cases of swine flu in the U.S. 22 million cases. This is the strategy. Okay, we've been exposed, the CD says. This is a problem, a serious problem. So our lies have been revealed. The only way out for us is to tell a far bigger lie, right? And that's exactly what they did. Not just a far bigger lie, but a monumentally larger lie than the first lie that they told. Amazing, amazing, amazing. Okay, boom. Now we come to vaccine adverse effects. Oh, safe and effective. Invariably safe and effective. Only in rare instances do we have any problems with vaccines. They're just astonishingly safe. Well, not really. There is a system, a federal government system for reporting what's called adverse effects to vaccinations. Doctors can report them, and nurses can report them, and patients or parents of children can report them. But most people in the public in the U.S., first of all, are not even aware that this system of reporting exists. And furthermore, if you're a doctor and you give a vaccine to a kid, and 3 days later it's apparent, or 3 hours later, that this kid has suffered irreversible brain damage from the vaccine, are you anxious to deliver a report to the federal government that you gave this vaccine? I don't think so. Call me crazy. I just don't think that doctors are really tremendously enthusiastic about making that kind of confession, or nurses. Therefore, we can assume pretty much, I would say, that however many of these adverse reactions to vaccines are reported to the federal government system every year, it's an underreport by a great deal. Underreport. So if we're talking about somewhere on the order of 10 to 12,000 of these adverse reports that are in fact made every year to this federal system, then how do we get the actual number, or how do we estimate it? So Barbara Lowe Fisher, who was the head of a private group called the National Vaccine Information Center, NVIC, came up with an interesting method. She cited a former FDA commissioner, David Kessler, who said that the number of adverse reactions every year in the U.S. to drugs is vastly unreported, that you could multiply that number by 10 or even 100 to get the actual number. So applying that rule to vaccines, we would be talking about not 10,000 adverse reactions a year in the United States, but 100,000 if we multiplied by 10. Or if we multiplied by 100, we would be talking about 1 million every year. Take your pick, or somewhere in between. Invariably safe and effective, not a problem. We rarely see a reaction, an adverse reaction to a vaccine. I mean, my goodness. That's what happens on television all the time. We bring Dr. Hassan Foufar, the expert from the Googly-Doo Institute, and that's what he says. But the facts are the facts, and they contradict vitally in this case. Boom. Next stop, Zika, the Zika Freaka Show. I've covered this several times with Jimmy, but in a nutshell, what happens is this. In Brazil, which is supposedly the center of this, a virus called Zika is being blamed for a birth defect in babies that results in smaller heads and brain damage. And this defect is called microcephaly. And so we have heard now tremendous amount of propaganda from the CDC and the World Health Organization and everybody and his brother about how this is a very dangerous virus, and if a woman who is getting pregnant or is pregnant or will be pregnant has the virus, it could very well result in her giving birth to a child who has this very serious, tragic birth defect. Only one problem. Only one problem. The whole notion that the Zika virus has been proved to be the cause of this birth defect is wacko. Has no scientific basis whatsoever, as I've demonstrated in several different ways. One of the most convincing is that the Brazilian researchers, even as they adjust their figures, when they take the total number of confirmed birth defect cases, microcephaly cases in Brazil, and they say, okay, in how many of these cases can we even find some trace of the Zika virus? Because, you know, that's what you would do to begin to establish a causative connection. You with me? They only find the presence of the virus in perhaps 20% of the cases of microcephaly. But no good. Back to the drawing boards. Because by conventional medical standards of how you prove a virus causes a disease, you have to be able to begin with to find it in all or overwhelmingly most of the cases of that condition. Otherwise, it doesn't work. You go back to the drawing board. And that's what's happened. So in the wake of that failure, a couple of studies have been cooked up that have been published mainly to get headlines in newspapers that say, we have definitely now established that the Zika virus is the cause of microcephaly. Oh, yes. But examining these studies shows not the case at all. In one study, they took several different groups of people, and in each group they found this same very weak, flaccid correlation between the presence of the Zika virus and this condition called microcephaly. Very weak, underfed correlation. And they decided that this is now, they're doing, I don't know what you'd call it, magic, not really, some kind of conjuring. If we take these different groups, in each one of which there's only a very weak correlation, and we bunch them all together, then we're really making a strong case. Wow. How do they work that angle? Wrong. Absolutely wrong. If you have several groups where you haven't proved anything and you put all the groups together, you still haven't proved anything. In fact, it looks worse. And in the other study, they finally claim that they were able to produce a birth defect like microcephaly by injecting Zika virus into some mice. Whether or not they really were able to do this or not is, to me, unclear, but certainly not in an overwhelming percentage of the mice. And even one of the great stalwarts of modern medicine at the National Institutes of Health, Anthony Fauci, pointed out, well, yeah, but, mice are really not humans. This is, of course, a monumental revelation. And, in fact, he said, mice are, one of the worst species for testing things on that you're then going to make inferences to humans from. So, yeah, it's a little bit of a problem. But nevertheless, got lots of headlines. Hey, we finally demonstrated it, proved it, and so on. So on the basis of no proof, we have this massive amount of scaremongering going on around the world. That's what's happening. Indeed, that is exactly what's happening. And I will wrap it up, see how fast I can do this, with the question, does the HIV virus actually exist? That's a boggler. Or to put it another way, have the researchers ever proved that it exists? And here I refer to the outstanding work, I would say, of a group of scientists in Australia called the Perth Group. Eleni Eliopoulos is the head of that group. And she makes a very strong case that the original research on HIV and even research that took place in later years failed to do one of the things that you must do in order to isolate a virus and prove that it actually exists. All has to do with a centrifuge. You take a certain amount of material that you believe may contain a virus, and you spin it at high speed and in a sucrose solution. And the virus will settle down further until it reaches a certain level where its weight is basically the same weight as the solution, and it will stop there. And that's what you can then go in and examine and photograph with an electron microscope, and then look at the particles that you can see, and you can get some idea of whether or not you're looking at a virus, certain kind of a virus. Well, it turns out, apparently, that the original researchers' electron microscope photos of HIV never showed anything that happened after this essential centrifuge action was supposed to be undertaken. They just showed stuff before it was centrifuged and made a kind of gross interpretation. They didn't do the work. They didn't do the research. They didn't look for the truth, apparently. So those are the apples that I have presented tonight, back to back, boom, 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 just to show you what I, as a reporter, have been dealing with since 1987. These mind-boggling scandals, and there are many others that I could jump in here with if I had another 6 hours. The stuff that people, when they say, you know, I have suspicions about what's happening in the medical system. Yeah, well, these things go way beyond the normal level of suspicion that people have. These are all the kinds of things that, if people were alert and aware, would make them fall off their chair. Back to back to back to back, I've dealt them out here for you so that you can get a sort of a sensation of how really crazy things are. It's always good to come back to that once in a while and just kind of refresh. You know, it's a refresher course in Insanity 101, subtitle Science, subtitle Medicine. Just to say, oh yeah, I had forgotten how crazy things actually are, but now now I remember. All right, I'm up to speed. And on that note, I thank you very much. This is Jon Rappoport.
Thank you, John. Absolutely amazing stuff. And for everybody out there, go back and listen to this again, take your notes out, and hit every one of those 7 points and go and check it out for yourselves, because that's what you need to do when you need to, have your frontal lobes blown out on your lap. Thank you so much, John, and have a great, safe weekend. Of course, John's website is nomorefakenews.com. Thank you so much, John.
Thank you, Jimmy.
Be safe. Jon Rappoport, the absolute very best. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. I'm going to get out of here because I got to get Peter Joseph in. This is Fade to Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Tonight, Peter Joseph. That was Jon Rappoport, nomorefakenews.com. This is Fade to Black, bespoke radio for the masses. Very special presentation tonight. Zeitgeist director, Peter Joseph, right after this short break. Stay with us.
This is Fade to Black with Jimmy Church on the Game Changer Radio Network and KGRA, the Global Radio Alliance.
The station that talks the net. KGRA Radio.
Hello, I'm Katie, and you're listening to my main man, Jimmy Church, on jimmychurchradio.com.
Hi, this is Ray Hobbs here, repping the planet, and you're listening to my good friend, Jimmy Church, Fade to Black, on the Game Changer Network and the KGRA digital broadcast station.
Results may vary.
Hello, I'm Jerry Mathers. I was the Beaver in Leave It to Beaver, and 20 years ago, I almost died from type 2 diabetes. When I was diagnosed with type 2, I was shocked. My blood sugar was through the roof. Now, the very same natural remedies I use to control my type 2 diabetes are available for you in a super easy program called the Diabetes Solution Kit, and I should know it works. I use the very same techniques to drop 40 pounds of fat, get my blood sugar under control, and watch my type 2 diabetes fade into thin air. If you have diabetes, I urge you to try this step-by-step plan. It has all the natural techniques I used, and it works a lot faster, too. I'm Jerry Mathers, and if I can do it, you can do it, too.
If you'd like to normalize your blood sugar and stop taking your diabetes medication completely with your doctor's approval, go to 33diabetesreverse.com. That's 33diabetesreverse.com. Reverse your diabetes in as little as 30 days by going to 33diabetesreverse.com. That's 33diabetesreverse.com now.
Imagine no longer being tied down to your computer, but having the freedom to take live talk radio with you anywhere you go. TalkStream Live introduces our first ever iPhone application. The talk shows you follow now follow you. And your iPhone is now the fastest and easiest way to stay connected to the best talk radio on the internet. Let TalkStream Live transform the way you listen to radio. Listen to live talk shows 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Mobile talk radio from TalkStream Live. Now available in the iTunes App Store.
This is Toby Kebbell. You're listening to JimmyChurchRadio.com. Don't hurt me, Jimmy. I'm only little.
Hey, I'm Adrian Grenier. And this is Ari Gold. We're the Honey Brothers. We're of the Honey Brothers. Hey, I'm Adrian Grenier. And I'm Ari Gold. We're the Honey Brothers. and you're listening to Jimmy Church.
The Revolution.
What's up, Fadernauts? Studio Dome loves Fade to Black and the F2B audience so much that they have put together the ultimate stereo Bluetooth system. They've done it just for you. Man, check this out. The Studio Dome SBB2 stereo system is here. It's featuring 2 Studio Boombox 2 SBB2 wireless Bluetooth speakers, packed in its own custom hardshell case. This Studio Dome system features the very latest in stereo Bluetooth technology. The 2 full-range boomboxes are in true wireless stereo. You've got to hear this. It's amazing. It's just $129, and use the promo code JCRTWS, and you'll also get free shipping. It's simple. Just go to jimmychurchradio.com, click on the Studio Dome banner. Go Beckley Tepe.
This is Micah Hanks of the Gralien Report, and you're listening to Jimmy Church on Fade to Black, across the globe on the Game Changer Radio Network and the one and only KGRA Radio, The Planet.
All right. Welcome back, Fade to Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church, on the Game Changer Network and KGRA, The Planet. Let's do this. This show tonight, very special presentation. Peter Joseph is an American musician. He's a filmmaker, author, and social activist, and creator of the Zeitgeist film series. He is the founder of the Zeitgeist Movement, the annual Zeitgeist Media Festival for the Arts, and is on the advisory board steering committee for the Project Peace on Earth. Apart from ongoing feature film projects, Peter launched a free TV-style web series called Culture in Decline back in July of 2012, which has been translated now into over 25 languages. He is a pioneer of free, open distribution media. His work supports nonprofit, unrestricted syndication via free online viewing and free downloads. He conducts such work via his production company, Gentle Machine Productions, LLC. I would like to welcome for the first time to Fade to Black, Peter Joseph. Peter, welcome to the show.
Hey, Jimmy, I appreciate you having me on, man. How you doing?
Oh, it's been a long road getting you on, man, but we finally pulled it off. Welcome.
Thank you.
Now, a couple of things, but the best part of the interview is going to start now in that you get the first-time guest disclaimer, and it's an honor. Next time when you're on with us, you don't get it, but that disclaimer is very simple. This is just you and I sitting on my couch having a conversation between friends, and whatever happens, happens, but we'll be friends at the end. Are you ready?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a cool disclaimer, isn't it?
Perfect.
Yeah, exactly. Now, I kind of want to start here. Oh, actually, before we actually start talking, you're a musician, and today Led Zeppelin won their case, this plagiarism case with Stairway to Heaven. You're a percussionist, man. You grew up with John Bonham like anybody else from our generation. How do you think? Do you feel good about Led Zeppelin winning, or maybe they did plagiarize Stairway to Heaven? How does that sit with you?
Well, property rights in this culture is out of control, first of all, and in the music and in the arts in general, it's very difficult to separate the natural evolution of creativity and influence. Everything that I've ever learned or played, whether it was improvised or obviously could be sheet music as well. There's really, it's all influenced. It's all coming from various other creative artists that generate the future of what we call music or anything. I mean, I can't think of any kind of originality that you could ever call pure, unless maybe it's a spontaneous effect of some child that effectively has just been born, if you know what I mean.
Right.
So it's a silly argument. I think Zeppelin, speaking of that one, it's more amusing to me, just the fact that someone would sue them for a series of chords. And then on the contrary, you know how many people have taken that same chord structure and made songs out of it since Zeppelin's time? And you don't see Zeppelin turning around and suing those people.
Yeah,
So,
my dad, who's a musician, he once told me when I was a kid, it was really funny, and it stuck with me to this day. He goes, Jimmy, there are no new notes.
Absolutely. And rather than look at that as, some kind of problem, which is truly, economically driven, clearly. I mean, we have a distorted property-driven culture. We have people patenting biological signatures and trying to, I don't even want to go on a tangent about the crimes against nature with Monsanto and so on. This is a sick, weird, twisted world we live in where everyone thinks they own everything. And that's indicative of a lot of the stuff I do with the movement and my general writing. My general disposition, to give you the broad view, is that no one owns anything and no one's original. You share this environment just as you share the air you breathe. You can't possibly have an ownership worldview in any truly tangible sense. So rather than pretend like we're all, writing things ourselves, it's time we start to look at the synergy and that we're all connected and we're all sharing data, and that's just the way it is. There's no such thing as originality.
I'm going to hit you with this. Why is it, and I've been in many bands, I'm a guitar player, and why is it that the drummer is always the smart guy in the band? Why is that? It's certainly never the lead singer.
It's interesting. My mother sent me an article a while back that claimed, and I barely read it, but it claimed that somehow the act of being a percussionist in a drum set, the kind of dexterity required, it generates some kind of mental process that is attuned to what mathematicians seem to be wired for. So they did MRI studies and such, but apparently abstract thinking is more related to percussionists. Again, this is just what the report said. Someone can type that up if they want to check it out. So I have no idea, man.
Yeah, and you know exactly what I'm talking about. It's really funny that you get your band together in high school, right? You're playing in the garage, and you got your collection, and you can look around and you already know who the smart guy is. It's really strange. So anyway, let's move on. You are a musician, and you started you're a musician. You're doing your thing out there, and I'm going to let you tell the story, but you put together this how do I want to say this? A show, an act about these theories, and you wanted to present it with music and with that background to it, which is a great idea. But did you have any idea that you would be here today, having nearly changed the world? I mean, that is a crazy thing to go from one thing and a set of ideas and a belief to where you are today. Did you have any clue that you were going to go on this road?
Well, I'm not so sure about the changing of the world part as of yet, but as far as the actual performance, I was working, trying to survive, and the general competitive, narcissistic ethic that most all of us fall victim to as a general necessity in this culture, given where we are. So I was doing all that crap, advertising and Wall Street. And music, of course, was always there on the side. I would do freelance stuff, but mainly it was a private interest for me at that point in time. By 2007, I decided music was more of a meditation. I had, ensemble work that I did. I composed. I gave recitals. And one day I was like, okay, I'm going to do something that's a little more, multimedia, because I was doing film editing and various multimedia production at a company I worked for, and I'd never actually produced anything on that level, so I had to deal with that skill. I was basically in advertising doing music composition and editing. They kind of morphed together, so I wanted to do something for myself with that new skill set that I was kind of forced to learn, for better or for worse. So Zeitgeist was a 6-night run in downtown Manhattan. It was a free performance. I set up these 2 big screens, and I put this huge kind of vaudevillian percussion setup. You could see some old pictures of it on zeitgeistmovie.com. And very few pictures actually were sourced to. I'm amazed I didn't record more of it. It's really unfortunate given the history of it. I wish I had a recording of the whole thing. But nevertheless, this big setup, and I basically went around and posted little cards everywhere. I just was gung-ho. I don't even know what inspired me to do it so much, because clearly I just did it as a free performance. Just wanted to see people's effect. It cost me quite a bit to do it, and I had to take lots of time off. But anyway, so I give the performance, 6-night run. I took DVDs, and I burnt them. I ripped them, and I put them on a computer, and I made all my editing through ripped DVDs with some basic animation stuff that I did on my own. I mean, the editorial was mine, but I stole all that footage. I mean, literally none of it was legal.
Right.
So I do this performance run. It was really quite funny to see tourists that had happened to get a card, and then they'd come and, of course, leave in the middle of it because they were so perplexed. And then there was a kind of like a core group. Then some people even came back for multiple nights because they were so intrigued by it. But overall, when it ended, I didn't think anything of it. I mean, people came up and gave commentary and their critiques, and I saw it as just kind of a fun catharsis. I had all these things that I'd been learning about, and I wanted to get it out there in some kind of display, and that was that. I certainly wasn't intending to ever pursue film in any way. And once that was over, my friend had said, Google has this big thing. You can throw up a video on Google, and they just host it for free. It's the only site that you can have a full-length video, as opposed to YouTube, which had maybe 10 minutes at that time. YouTube was nothing back then. It was Google Video. So I threw it up there. I think I posted it on one religion site, and then maybe one other blog that had to do with September 11th. And then it just went crazy viral, completely out of my control. I even hid for a long time. I didn't have any information. I didn't even have a website. So I threw up a website very briefly and was very, very cryptic. And then slowly emails piled in. Like, it was wacky. I tracked at one point, for the course of 7 months, I received an email every 2 minutes.
Wow.
Just constant.
Wow.
And obviously impossible to answer of that, but I did my best to try and engage. But of course, that also led to threats of lawsuit and different figures that had seen their footage being used or didn't like this or that. And it took some time, but I fleshed all that out. The statute of limitations is now up on that movie, so if anyone out there listening still wants to sue me, sorry. So, that's how it happened, and it completely transformed my social focus, because, again, I had my opinions on society, but I wasn't about to step up in any particular way. So I always kind of felt like I was pushed. So the second film came out a year later, and I really, really honed in my focus to think about, if I'm going to complain about things, I might as well talk about some solutions. So the concept of a post-scarcity or resource-based economy came forward in lieu of the tradition of many different figures like Buckminster Fuller and Jacques Fresco to a lot of great minds that have sourced this type of despotic climate that we're in to effectively the structural roots of our social system. And then the movement started, and then 8 years later, as far as the movement, actually we're going on a decade now for the actual film being released in 2007. That's pretty amazing to think about. Here I am, and I'm basically working on a new trilogy. But anyway, I won't go on all that, but that's how it happened. It's completely spontaneous, and I kind of tell people I felt like I was pushed into all this. It really wasn't a deliberate decision to want to go this route. And
it just ended. We just got a little bit of static coming from your end.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, it is actually coming from you as you speak. I hear it. So let's see if it catches up and we can move past it. Anyway, we may need to reset. Not that big of a deal. It's live radio. Stuff happens. Now, in your experience with Wall Street and what you were doing there with big money, did you ever figure out really how the money system works? Because to me, I think it is so complex that even the most professional guys at the highest level in the banking system really don't understand what's going on.
Oh, absolutely not. Well, first of all, do you still hear static?
Yeah, I do. And you know what? Let's. I'm going to break to it. Let's do this. I'm going to bust in. I'm going to tell the network now. I'm going to do a commercial right now, and we're going to reset with Peter. That's the fastest and easiest way to do it. Peter Joseph is our guest. We're going to do a hard reset right now, and we'll be right back. More with Peter Joseph. Stay right there.
Way out here, we listen to Jimmy Church.
You're listening to Fade to Black.
Always on the edge of the hottest alternative talk. Jimmy Church with Fade to Black. KGRARadio.com.
¿Qué tal, mis amigos? Yo
soy Mario Carson, el tiburón, y los invito para que escuchen a mi buen amigo Jimmy Church Radio. ¡Claro que sí!
Foodforliberty.com sells high-quality storable foods from Numana. Whether you want to be prepared in the event of an emergency or an outdoor sports enthusiast, Foodforliberty.com has your prepackaged single-serve packs or kits for the entire family. Numana is known for high-quality, great-tasting, GMO-free, super nutritious food with no chemical preservatives. With a 25-year shelf life, you can't beat the feeling of being food secure when you need it most. Right now, Foodforliberty.com is offering a special gift, a heavy-duty Survivor dry storage box designed for extreme bug-out conditions. This storage box is built to last, includes compass, signaling mirror, and is yours free with a $50 order. Go to foodforliberty.com right now and pick up your quality storable foods from Numana. To get the Survivor dry storage box, use promo code LIBERTY. It makes good sense to be prepared. Go to foodforliberty.com.
Did you ever turn to your radio for your favorite talk show to find that it's been preempted for this?
In the air to deep right center. Back goes Lewis to the wall, and it's out of here!
Or this?
And I'm ashamed of you, Hillary, for voting for it.
Do you have a favorite talk radio program that's not available in your city? Just go to TalkStreamLive.com for links to the best streaming talk radio shows. At TalkStream Live, you will find live talk shows 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. All your favorites are here. With such a large selection, you will also discover some new favorites. On the go and still want to listen? With a mobile smartphone, simply type TalkStream Live on your internet browser. Now you can take internet radio with you. You will also find hundreds of music, news, and sports streams. Best of all, the TalkStream Live directory is free and there's never a login required. Remember TalkStreamLive.com, the fastest route between you and your favorite talk radio show.
You are listening to Fade to Black with Jimmy Church on the Game Changer Network.
Oi, oi, I'm Reese Evans. You're listening to Jimmy Church. This is Revolution. The revolution will not be televised. The revolution is on radio. Ciao.
Welcome back to Fade to Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church, on the Game Changer Network and KGRA The Planet. You can follow me on Twitter right now at JChurchRadio. And you can also follow Peter at Zeitgeist Film. Very simple. All right, Peter, right before that little interruption, the question is a very simple one. Does anybody at any level in finance and the banking industry understand the complexities of what is really going on?
Like most people in business, the folks that work on Wall Street have a particular narrow understanding of the game that they play, just like in general market economics. So no, nobody that I met during my instruction working in Wall Street, and I say working in Wall Street, that doesn't mean I was literally on Wall Street, but I worked with traders and I worked from home privately, trading from a private account. But all of these people I met, they just maintained this gaming strategy, tunnel vision, which I think is pretty much the same as most people that engage the market economy overall. That's just the way the logic works. And absolutely not. No one understood fractional reserve banking. None of these guys have any concept of the debt system, that there's more debt being created than actual money in circulation, which leads into social slavery and effectively adds to the history of debt bondage. That is the longest standing form of imposed slavery on this planet, going back about 5,000 years. So it's an oblivious culture that, again, they're just gaming. That's all the financial system is a gaming process, no different than the game of Monopoly.
With now that we've got nearly 10 years behind us from the release of Zeitgeist 1, to today, I think obviously that the film now stands more on its own now and can support itself even than when it came out in 2007. 2008, we had the market crash that the film was actually warning everybody about, and then that market crash happened. And today, with the critics out there of Zeitgeist that say that, the Federal Reserve is a conspiracy of, the big banks and the Illuminati and the cabal running the Federal Reserve. They don't take the time to actually research on how the Federal Reserve came to be. They just want to be a critic of conspiracy theory. Am I wrong in saying that? They don't even want to do their own investigation.
Well, I probably don't have to tell you about the intellectual bigotry that is ever pervasive around any of this kind of subject matter when you're talking about groups acting on their own behalf in their own self-interest in the sense of monopoly and cartel. It's really quite simple. I shy away from the group how do I put this? The group demonization, and I move towards what is a systems view, a cultural influence coming from the gaming logic of our economic system, which naturally leads to conspiratorial intentions, collusion, monopoly, cartel, and all of that. I tend to find that people get a little too caught up with demonizing a particular group as though that group has always existed and that's the only group that's the problem. It's really not a group that's the problem, such as the Federal Reserve. It's not the Federal Reserve cartel that's really the problem. It's the fact that they are at the highest echelon of finance and they have the most control, and they benefit from all the things that the U.S. government has allowed them to, by the way, because the system is fundamentally rigged in favor of big business and big finance. And if you know anything about big finance, it's not that it's just money. It's about all the loans and corporate structures and restructuring. It's the entire bedrock of the corporate institutions that we all complain about is the financial institutions. Without the financial structure, the corporations wouldn't have half of the power that they do to influence world policy and so on. So when it comes to the Federal Reserve and all of that stuff, well, going back to your other point, actually, is before I forget, I find it very amusing that all the critics that hated my first film so much have everything basically has more or less come true with respect to the insight put forward. And by the way, that insight wasn't just me. It's all the things that I was researching at the time. We had all these people that would say you're crazy if you thought the U.S. government was tracking you. Oh, that's just tinfoil hat conspiracy. Right. And then suddenly Edward Snowden and Julian Assange come out with profoundly absurd revelations about what the U.S. government and world powers are doing to monitor their population. So over time, I think maturity will prevail, and people are going to begin to see that we're not really dealing with what is, I guess, being condemned as a conspiracy culture that is jumping to conclusions, even though there is a group like that. They exist. I'm honestly not a big fan of the kind of Alex Jones people. He jumps far too extreme. These guys they want to assume everything is a lie. And while most things certainly gravitate towards lies when it comes to government and business, we have to be a little bit more structuralist and rational with the way we view this kind of stuff. And I think I've done my best to convey that. I mean, at the end of the day, it's not a matter of groups. I want to reinforce that. It's a matter of the structure that's giving birth to a certain in-group, out-group mentality and an overall competitive structure that thrives on the destruction of some groups at the expense of, to the benefit of others. And that's just what our social paradigm is. Whether you call it conspiracy or just business as usual, it's up to you,
Well, and certainly I'm going to say this just once because it's not a bro love thing that I have, okay? But I'm just going to say this. You have certainly stuck to your guns in what you are trying to convey. And I say that like this. Any marketing guy in Hollywood with the success of Zeitgeist, right, would go, we have every way to make money here, right? And you could nearly be a billionaire today with the amount of views and the success that the films have had. But you have chosen to go through a free distribution system, which goes against the very fabric of what one is supposed to do in the United States of America. And so with that free distribution system, how do you eat? How do you survive in this capitalistic society today when you've chosen your distribution network that you have?
Well, it's a mixture of things. Well, first I'll say that my opposition to, it's actually for better or for worse, I'm not quite sure. In one side, and I'll be blatantly honest, if I knew kind of what I knew now and the impositions that I have against me now, trying to make another film series that's actually live action, not documentary, which is substantially more expensive, I would probably have been a little bit more pro-market because I did completely and utterly reject that ethic out of pure principle.
Right.
And a lot of my friends look at me like, well, you should have done this just to ease your life a little bit more. But nevertheless, it's interesting to me that support still has manifest because I think a great deal of integrity about why I chose that film trilogy to be released for free online and so on. It has still brought in general support. It has actually still brought in third-party digital distribution. So it's picked up on Netflix. That's one distribution channel. That was very surprising. And also I do freelance stuff simultaneously. I did a music video for the band Black Sabbath. I don't know if you were aware of that.
Yes.
But so that there's little things like that, and I still have other contractual things I do on the side simultaneously. So it's a mixture of things. The new work I'm doing now is very much going to cost substantially more than documentary. So I'm going to have to actually go more of a commercial route with that because the input is just far too extreme, and it really is gotten to a point where survival is in question. It's a very good thing I don't have a family with kids or anything because the odds of me doing this would be very slim.
Do you have any idea how many views the three films have had?
I conservatively put it at about a quarter of a billion.
That's insane.
I think some say it's more than that, frankly, because it's been so unbelievably multiplied, and it's in so many like I only see Google results that come from English-speaking countries. I have no idea what's going on in these other countries that have distributed in multiple language and in multiple in different search engines that I can't even see. So it's out of control. I run into people all over the place that ask me about it, and they're from all over the world. I probably get stopped once a month on the street, which is always very nerve-wracking. So it's been big, and it's pretty unbelievable that it's made that way.
Now,
that far.
Yeah, totally. Now let's go back, and one of the criticisms about the original film, which I don't agree with, so let me just start there, but that you've had to face the music on, is that first 10, 15 minutes of the religious presentation of the first film. And how everybody just wanted to chop you down with that on a factual basis. I've done my own research, and enough of it is solid. But how do you deal with that criticism? Do you just ignore it? And do you have an answer for it today?
No, I took that criticism very, very seriously. And if you go to zeitgeistmovie.com and scroll down, anyone can do this, there's a free 220-page book that can be downloaded in PDF form. It's not for sale. It took me a long time to compile it, and it goes line by line through the entire movie with sources and references. There's tons of references. The thing about the first religion section is the way I did it was so pop culture. It was so straight ahead sentence declarations. It was just a series of undefended, because I didn't care to sit there and make it a boring treatment where you're having to source things and talk about why. You just list it. And because I did that, it opened the floodgates for people to misinterpret, or to willfully misinterpret, I should say. So, people will have the weirdest grievances. They'll say, oh, well, Jesus wasn't born on December 25th. We didn't even have that kind of calendar. They miss the point that December 25th is the winter solstice. That's what it symbolizes. It has nothing to do with the actual date, September 25th. And there's numerous pagan gods born and around the winter solstice. That's a very important day. So they mince words and they distort things in a way that make it appear, especially if you're biased in a religious sense and you want to disprove this stuff, the arguments seem like they do so. I can go on a numerous list of how these very subtle misinterpretations exist. And it's very frustrating because people miss the big picture. But I will say that for anybody out there that thinks that section is false or whatever, please go review the 220-page booklet I made. And a great portion of that is actually about the first part, because I wanted to really respond to those critics directly.
Yeah, I think that was the easiest part for critics to go and take apart, too, as well. And this is the other thing, Peter, and it's really true, if you've got critics, that means you're doing something right.
Let's hope.
Yeah, never forget that, because if you don't have critics, then maybe you've missed the mark. You know,
I agree.
So now the separation right now that's going on with Britain, this vote today, the markets are now crashing today. Have you been following this?
Not as much as most. I'm really not much of an authority on this particular subject. I've had my head buried in projects so much. My awareness. I'll be honest though, and I'll say this as an aside. I used to be so heavy into news and watching what's happening in the world, and what I've come to see is that it's the same cycle of noise that repeats on a loop. It just has a different characterization as the loop spins, because the social system continues to produce the same type of general conflicts and outputs and destabilization. So what's happening in Europe, the EU with the TPP, these are all manifestations of pretty much the same cyclical behavior that are going to continue to be output by our social system. So on that basic level, I've come to kind of just be washed over with these types of events, because they just keep repeating themselves.
I do the same thing. I am part of the media, and I can't ignore the fact that I have the power of influence, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, so I am always very cautious, but the one thing that I'm very vocal about, even though I'm part of the media machine itself, is the media has fallen into the trap of manipulating via their commercial supporters. And without the commercial support, there is no TV or radio and so forth. And I get that. But this cyclical thing, not only with Big Pharma and the banking system, but what happens above and beyond that, the media itself now is nothing but steering society in a direction through fear. When did this start to happen for you? When did you start to notice it?
Well, I suppose around the time I made the first film, I was becoming more privy to that. I kind of pulled my head finally out from, being in a practice room for 10 hours a day to really starting to pay attention to what was happening. And I quickly began to learn about the media. And it really is self-evident to me. I wouldn't expect anything less from the media, because their loyalties have to come from a commercial place, because that's what the foundation of our society is. And it doesn't surprise me that it gets increasingly more convoluted. For example, we have our presidential candidate, Donald Trump. The only reason that he has gained the following is because the media saw him as a ratings plug. They plugged him because everyone paid attention to him, because what he was saying was so controversial. So they gave him the most airtime, because that translated into the most advertising time. And that particular nuance, that commercial interest to go with what the public is paying the most attention to, even if it's complete trivialness, is what basically guides the mainstream media, and hence why we're in the position we are today with such a bizarre election that is unfolding. So you see my point?
Yeah, I do. I
can't emphasize enough this kind of structuralist view. I mean, I don't think it's ever changed. You can go back to the early, Rockefeller influence and all the newspapers they bought up years ago, because they wanted to influence political media. It's really no different than historical communism simultaneously. A lot of people still have this disparate view between capitalism and communism. They forget that both systems, historically speaking, not in principle or theory, but both systems have absolutely demanded and required constant propaganda against the population. I mean, you look at the unions that tried to break out, and they were called communists in the early 20th century. The foundation of organized labor was at one point demonized, and people being killed and beaten because they thought it was a communist revolution. What would we do today without the unions attempting to get some kind of basic wage support from big corporations? So you see how this is unfolded. It's truly remarkable, and it's also sad how short attention span people's memories are. Like, people just don't seem to remember this slow pattern. And anyway, I could go on a long tangent about that, but I couldn't agree more. And it was around probably the Zeitgeist first film that I started to really pay attention to media and the influence that it had. I've also read lots of great authors since then. Antonio Gramsci, the guy who coined the term cultural hegemony, however you want to pronounce it. He's someone I recommend people look into, because what the media's main role is to conform society whether wittingly or not. See, I think a lot of this is automatic in the mind of the people that operate these corporations because they're just so ingrained in the value structure. It's not that they're deliberately trying, it's that they're defending themselves by defending the ideas they promote. And the media is there ultimately for cultural hegemony, which means that we're trying to conform society in favor of the ruling class, which is why people look up to billionaires, which is why people fawn over celebrities and Lamborghinis driving down the street. When the truth is that when you see a Lamborghini driving down the street, what you're looking at is a symbol of cultural and structural violence. You're looking at a symbol of inequality. That means people are being hurt for the benefit of somebody to have an excess. So
the chances of me pulling up to a stoplight and looking over and seeing you driving a Ferrari, very slim.
Yes, that'd be very, very slim.
I want to know your definition of conspiracy. And before you answer, the true definition of conspiracy is two or more people conspiring together to commit a crime. But today, pop culture, conspiracy now is just everything to do with the man, right? It doesn't necessarily have to be a crime. It's just that we're not being told what a reality is. What's your definition of conspiracy?
Well, I couldn't give you a custom definition apart from the more formalized one, which is the first one that you mentioned. But I can give you the observation of the way it's being perceived. I don't really think in terms of that. I look at it as a symbol and how that symbol is being interpreted through society.
Right.
On one side, you have the people that have become, I guess, I hate to say it, but it's sort of a conspiracy culture, which I am not fond of, and it's been turned into a kind of a paranoia. And again, I'm not a fan of a lot of people like Alex Jones and a lot of this sort of fomenting assumption that everything's a false flag and all this kind of right-wing stuff that kind of interplays with it. But at the same time, I see the victimization of people that simply want to know what's going on. They simply want to have a more clear understanding, and they find holes. They're using their rational mind to find holes in government arguments, usually government claims. And once they do, it brings you to the other side of the interpretation of that symbol, and that's the media and politically induced derisiveness. Oh, they're just conspiracy buffs or conspiracy theorists. Oh no, they're people don't get together and collude for their own self-interest. Oh, these are just those crazy conspiracy. And the moment you mention anything that falls into that categorization, such as the events of September 11th, which anybody in their right mind who actually took the time to research and go step by step and point by point, at a minimum, will find that there are so many holes in the government story, it's laughable. But the moment you attempt to be intellectual about it, the bigotry comes out, and you might as well be a guy that believes Elvis is living in Area 51 and he's about to get into a plane to fly some chemtrails over the planet. So you see what I'm saying?
I believe that Elvis is alive at Area 51, by the way. But you're exactly right. And when it comes to 9/11 and you have the thermonuclear weapons or hologram airplanes, I don't go in that direction. But the one thing that I'm very uncomfortable with, and anybody that wants to deny the conspiracy side of 9/11, is that Washington knew that it was going to happen, right? And just in its very basic form, if that much is true, then we've got a huge problem with 9/11. Everything else, everything is on the table, and I'll listen to anybody. But Washington knew that was going to happen before it happened, and that is a problem.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's as a single truth that is completely undeniable, that has been reported in both alternative and mainstream media. It's very clear the Bush administration knew about what was happening, over 200 and some warnings. So they knew the political expedience of this. And when you actually understand history and you've taken the time to go back and look at the deviousness of governments and the general malicious intent that all governments possess to different degrees. But when it comes to empire, it's the absolute worst, as the American empire still proceeds. You see that this is just business as usual. This kind of thinking that you have to sacrifice part of the population for the political will is easy to justify in the minds of those that are really high up in this type of elitism. So it's just, again, it's not that difficult to assess when you are a student of history. So, yeah, I couldn't agree more.
Yeah, and how, okay, now, how we got here today with our money system, with our system of government, and everything else that's in place, our educational system, our health, how we got here is one thing. But how do we start to change? Because it has gotten so complex that you just can't, there isn't a one magical wand that you can wave. But how do we effectively start to change our future?
Well, that's an enormous question. I would to put it into a shorthand, so to speak, I would say we start to realize what elements of our social evolution, specifically economic, what elements are evolving that alleviate the structural oppression and the inherent elitism that we've been seeing for going on thousands of years. And in a lot of the work of the movement and a book I'm currently finishing, I talk about these I guess you can call them signposts of socioeconomic evolution, mainly through technology, that slowly erode the necessity and justification of what is effectively a competitive market system of economics. As long as we maintain this post-Malthusian, socially Darwinistic worldview that has been completely ingrained in culture. We see it through all of our sporting events. You had the Pentagon spending $7 million recently on advertising during football games. You see this constant ethic of winning and losing and this sickness where everyone wants to win. It's not about winning, it's about helping. This total social distortion has completely permeated, and it functions in multiple levels. And this is a slight aside, but I want to say it. Because what it really does, it's hierarchy enhancing for an entire culture to believe that the only way they're going to be respected is to win and compete, to compete and win and to gain social status through material gain. And if you instill that in a population, then you've automatically justified the existence of the ruling class. And everyone, I put it this way, rather than wanting to eliminate slavery, the people now want to be slave owners. So this is the social distortion, and the way you unweave that, the way you unravel that, is you start to shift our economic structure, which is the most foundational element of our social system. As you know, all social systems are basically defined by their economic premise. Even the governments that arise within different types of social systems are birthed from the economic premise, whether it's capitalism, whether it's communism, whether it's mercantilism, whether it's feudalism. These are all based on economic orientations first. So our goal, the movement, and what I talk about almost constantly, is the need to adjust the very foundation of the economic system. And you can do that by observing different trends. One trend is called ephemeralization, doing more with less. This was talked about by R. Buckminster Fuller. And it has to do with the fact that as time moves forward, our economic capacity to do more and more and more with less and less and less, gravitating towards global abundance, is a very real thing. Jeremy Rifkin, another theorist, calls it a zero marginal cost effect. He basically, if you imagine for a moment you have a machine, and that machine costs, say, $100 to make. That machine is a production machine, and the goal of that machine is to produce something. So the first thing that machine, once built, produces is $100 in theory, because it cost the machine, right, to build was $100.
Right.
So if, let's say, the machine, and this is an abstraction, obviously. I mean, there's other things that would come into play, but you follow the logic. Let's assume you made 2 goods out of this machine. That means that each one of those goods costs $50. Let's assume you made 4 goods. That would mean each one of those goods costs $25. Now let's assume you made 10,000 of those. I'm not going to do the math for you right now, but you see how minuscule the actual production cost of each one of those things is. And this kind of zero marginal cost, this movement towards more and more with less, is basically the alleviation. It signifies the alleviation of scarcity and the need to orient our society to produce an abundance. And that means you start to diminish the need for competition, the need for trade, and you can theorize all the way to the end of poverty and the creation of not a utopia. It's never going to be that simple. But if you organize our economy to seek abundance, to seek collaborative means, and there are many other aspects of this I can speak about, such as the use of open source, such as the use of mechanization. We have technological unemployment that is ravaging society. Wendy's, amusingly enough, just announced that they are going to use automation now because they're not in favor of the rise in minimum wage. I think that's hilarious. It's a contradiction of the entire ethic of the system, and these things are happening regardless. They have nothing to do with capitalism's development. They have everything to do with our technological and intellectual capacity to solve problems, which has a mind of its own. And if we can just jump on board with that and we can bring it to its logical conclusion, we can end what is a system of social control known as market economics and move into a completely different world, which we're going to have to do, man, because we're destroying the planet at an amazing rate. And the social destabilization, like we see in Orlando, like we've seen all around, whether it's real or artificial terrorism, whether it's gang violence, everything is starting to become unhinged. And it's all because of this scarcity formation that we're seeing in parallel to our abundance potential. So in other words, we're not appreciating the abundance. Everyone's pushing the market and scarcity. And as long as we keep doing that, I'm really fearful by the time we hit about 2040. Between pollution and basic environmental collapse because of biodiversity loss, we use about a third of the way through on this planet each year. We use all the resources the planet makes. It's completely inefficient. The waste is out of control. I can go on a long list, but we either change or we die, which is what I've been saying.
Exactly. And to get to that point, we would almost have to skip a generation and start over, because the really scary, nightmarish thought is that we have an entire generation watching the Kardashians, right? We have to somehow instill amnesia into this generation that they can stop admiring that type of system that is there, because they watch it every single day, and we're talking about tens of millions of people.
Oh, it's truly mind-blowing what the culture of the United States specifically has fostered. The culture fostered is so comedically, almost satirically indicative of the worst possible commercial and status values. I don't even know where to begin. So that's another conversation entirely. I'll put it this way. I've said this also a few times. The kind of changes that the Zeitgeist Movement promotes, they're going to happen one way or another. The question is how much suffering is going to have to occur before they do.
Yeah, and then there's the flip side. I appreciate technology, as do you, right? Technology has gotten us to here, innovation, because of competition, and bigger, better, faster. There would be no free distribution system for the Zeitgeist Movement if it wasn't for the bastards that created the banking system that caused competition. Is there a way for both of these systems to mutually get along?
Well, I would disagree with you slightly, because I've thought about that a lot. I get that that's a common criticism. People say, "Oh, well, if it wasn't for the market system and capitalism, you wouldn't have a computer."
Right.
And that's actually completely unfounded. I'm not saying that what you're saying is not partially relevant, but there's a knee-jerk reaction to assume that everything we see around us has come from competition and not from absolute pure ingenuity in technology. And there's lots of unique trend studies to show that during times of economic crisis, along with comparisons between the way the United States manifested its technological growth and historical communism did in the USSR,
right,
that there's a deep and unsupported mythology that capitalism is actually functional in any kind of productive sense when it comes to human ingenuity. I mean, Russia was right on point with all of their technological advancements. They just had a different mode of what they were doing, and they had a high level of elitism in the way that they organized. Technological advancement is independent of capitalism. It's independent of markets. And any great engineer that's actually inspired, to want to solve problems, which is what it's about, very rarely has an actual economic interest. I would say that the competitive element is actually gravitating towards frivolous technological developments. I mean, how many versions of Apple crap do they make? I mean, how many iPhones and iPods? They deliberately they stagger this type of so-called innovation, building this culture of neurotic need because of the need to get market share and sell. and because of to maintain their shareholders and their stock and all of that. And that process is utterly wasteful. I mean, it's profoundly wasteful in destroying the planet. So if I was to compare the two, I would say, yes, competition has its subtle role in the development of things. But when it comes to human ingenuity, that's the most powerful force. And capitalism completely destroys itself with any integrity because its interest is not actually innovation. It's to sell. Its interest is to sell repeatedly, and to create waste and get anyone and everyone to buy over and over again, not improved efficiency and definitely not advancement in the most innovative way. Because if there were advancement, we would have refrigerators that last 1,000 years. If we had true intent, we would have computers and phones that are modular, and they would be updated based on component. We would have complete standardization across the entire technological spectrum, with people working in open source platforms online to design things in real time through CAD and engineering systems, where you actually make effectively a single computer system that has everything you could ever need based on current interests, with the innovation being a part of the collaborative commons, developed in a collaborative sense based on problem solving, not the need for income. And see, the thing about open source, which completely contradicts the ethic of capitalism and competition, is that open source has proven to be more efficient than people sitting in a boardroom and trying to invent values for people. Open source is the natural interaction of the creative minds of the population, true democratic thought, in fact. And because of the amazing prospect of this, of people coming online and sharing ideas and building things together, and the self-corrective nature of that, there's no more excuse for this idea that competition has been leading the world in innovation. It's debunked on about 3 or 4 different levels.
For sure. And there's a lot of examples today of where open source is positively the best way to go. And the internet in general is an example of that. And Washington certainly must have you on their radar, and not only the Zeitgeist films in general, but your ideas. Have you been contacted? Have they reached out to you at all for consultation, or have they tried to shut you down? Has there been an interaction with DC?
Oh no, not that I'm aware of. I mean, I have a lot of spooky things that happen in my world that I can't quite explain. And after going through the archives and work of people like Edward Snowden, I'm very cautious in the way I organize things through the internet and computers. But that's another conversation. I really no. Direct answer is no, and no one's contacted me, and no one's contacted me for positive or negative purposes. But there's a lot of suspicious things that go on in my world that I can't tell if it's just me being a little bit too concerned. But I'm very careful these days with how I organize things.
Yeah, and I guess more direct, but you've answered in saying no. But I would have thought that as they sit around and look at the economy and look at the market crashes and these bubbles and these things that we have gone through, and that they haven't reached out to you at least for consultation, just to see if they've got the right idea on how to move forward. But you're saying that they have completely shut down. They have not reached out.
Well, I'm not sure which area of government you're alluding to, but ultimately, broadly speaking, while there are some exceptions with people that do have what I consider to be more of a democratic socialist worldview, such as the presidential candidate Bernie Sanders and a couple other people in Congress, very, very few to pretty much no one is really willing to address the true detriments structurally that capitalism creates. It's considered like old hat now. Everyone thinks of, if you can't criticize capitalism. We've already done that. Marx already did that. He failed. No. No one pays attention to the logic anymore. And from a standpoint of elitism, you got to remember, as Thorstein Veblen stated, constitutional government is business government. Veblen was a beautiful economic theorist, much more intelligent than Marx in his assessment of the society as far as what has happened with the social structure and market economics and neoliberalism and utilitarianism and all those foundational theories. And I encourage people to read him. But his point is that really when you look at Congress and you look at all these people, they are utterly and have been always, since the very beginning, supported by business and economic interests. You can go back to the Founding Fathers and look at their logic simultaneously, such as their support for slavery. All of this stuff has been interwoven. It's only taken time for people to really get to really get an understanding of just how much of a confluence between business and government is. And to answer your question, why would government wish to remove the source of its own power? Because its own power is not just its laws, it's actually the business enterprise itself, the holistic business network, which is expanding beyond borders now, as you know, with the TPP and so on, NAFTA, the historical one, where business government is actually taking on a life of its own. It doesn't need sovereignty anymore. So like a virus, this thing, this business culture, this horribly malignant cancer is just spreading across the world. And that's really the power source, in other words. And no general political official, unless they're really attuned and likely not to be in office for very long, will approach the subject of the problems of market economics in the way that's really required. Not yet, anyway. Bernie Sanders and his rhetoric has come close, as many people have learned a lot about his march against inequality, which is good, but it's completely shortchanged because the Nordic models are not enough. You can't just imitate the Swedish or Norwegian models because they have good, social welfare systems and fail-safes. They have very little crime. They have very good public health. Those are all signposts towards improvement. But even those countries suffer tremendous deficiencies and are highly unsustainable.
We're going to hit a network break here in a couple of minutes, so you can answer this as quick as you can. But when I was in junior high school, I had a history teacher that presented to us an example of a culture that started in southern Indiana. It was called New Harmony. That was the name of the city. No money, grow your own food. We're gonna establish this, and we're gonna remove capitalism from it. And he said New Harmony failed, and this was the instruction to a bunch of 12-year-olds, right? Where he says, this type of society will never work. You need to have competition. And it was something that I never forgot, in that this was indoctrinated into a bunch of 8th graders.
Sure,
you know what I mean? And
you go back and look at those propaganda reels from the 1930s and 40s. And again, there's a long, deep history of, especially around the Great Depression, of where the business and government establishment really fought for any kind of socialist reforms. They really knew that capitalism was at risk. And this is what we have today, is, and what you experienced is really the echoes of all of that propaganda, because it's ubiquitous. If you go back in history, it's truly astounding what government actually did to manipulate society through people like Edward Bernays and other figures that use the power of advertising for social control. And obviously the direct answer is that such an assumption is wrong. For 99% of human history, we existed without money as hunter-gatherer tribes. The market reality is a modern convention. It has served certain purposes well, but has had seriously negative side effects. And we are at the end of an evolution. And that new evolution is an economy focused on post-scarcity with as little monetary and market involvement as humanly possible. Because the more we get away from that, the more you conquer the social dominance problems that have also been plaguing society and creating the vast spectrum of oppression that we continue to see. I understand you have a break now. But.
Yeah, which I have to do now to pay for this show. Our guest tonight, Peter Joseph. This is Fade to Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. I promised a stimulating conversation. We're going to get all of that and more next with Peter Joseph. Stay right there.
Hi everybody, this is Rob Halford, the Metal Guard on JimmyChurchRadio.com.
KGRA Radio. Intelligent talk.
So, you love talk radio? Then you'll love TalkStreamLive.com. TalkStream Live is always on, 24/7, with the best streaming talk shows. Find your favorite talkers and discover some new ones. It's free, readily available online or on any smartphone or tablet. Finding your favorite talk shows all in one place has gotten a whole lot easier. Just go to TalkStreamLive.com. Be sure to download the free apps from Google Play or the iTunes App Store. Would you like freedom from health insurance?
You're not alone. Whether you're self-employed, a small business owner, or an individual who purchases health care for yourself and your family, Liberty Health Share could be the answer. Liberty Health Share has united a community of like-minded people that actually share health care costs. And Liberty Health Share members are exempt from IRS penalties associated with the Affordable Care Act. Imagine freedom from insurance. You choose your own doctor and hospital. Your medical provider simply submits your bills to Liberty Health Share for processing. Why wait? You do have choices. Together we're changing healthcare for good. Find out more and get a free monthly estimate right now. For a limited time, use promo code TALK to save $50 when you enroll. Go to libertyhealthshare.com/option. That's libertyhealthshare.com/options.
Hi, I'm Richard Dolan. When I'm not hosting my radio program, The Richard Dolan Show on KGRA, or writing new books on UFOs, I run a publishing company. I'm proud to say that Richard Dolan Press has published some of the most fascinating books available on UFOs and related subjects. They include Dr. Bruce Maccabee's classic analysis of the UFO cover-up, David Marler's breakthrough book on triangular UFOs, Dr. Richard Sauter's unique work on underground bases, and other classics by Grant Cameron, Chase Kletsky, and Dr. Bob Wood, not to mention intriguing works by Eve Lorgan and Laurie MacDonald that deal with truly bizarre phenomena. I'm proud to publish such high-quality and original works, and there are several amazing books about to be released over the next few months. Go to richarddolanpress.com to learn more.
Did you know that when you're on the road with limited data or Wi-Fi available, you can still listen to every minute of Fade to Black by just calling 605-562-4482. No smartphone, app, or internet needed. It saves your data plan and no extra cost if you have unlimited minutes. Just call 605-562-4482. You can listen to me, Jimmy Church, on any phone, anytime, anywhere. Go Beckley Tappy.
You want to know a secret? I love ponies. I really love ponies. I'm serious. I couldn't stay sane without ponies to brush.
Why Fade to Black? Because you never got that pony, damn it.
This is Fade to Black with Jimmy Church on the Game Changer Radio Network and KGRA, the Global Radio Alliance.
Welcome back to Fade to Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Our guest tonight, director of the Zeitgeist film series, Peter Joseph, is with us. You can follow us on Twitter at JChurchRadio. Come join the conversation. You can follow Peter at Zeitgeist Films. Hey, Peter, this is the craziest election cycle ever in the history, probably of the known universe. Have you ever thought about running for office?
It goes a little bit against my worldview. I don't think I would work out in that kind of capacity. I should point out, personality-wise, I'm very much an introvert, and all of this stuff is a little bit foreign to me. You're talking to, again, a classical musician that spent most of his time in a room 10 hours a day. So I'm still getting acclimated to public speaking and things like that, even though I've given lots of talks up until now. I can't see myself in any kind of political context, no. I'd rather try and influence what is really important, and that's the grassroots movement to completely override the political process. Override with one that actually isn't loyal to business interests structurally. And until you have a complete revolution of the entire system, meaning the entire social system, the political process is going to have very severe limitations. I've got a lot of people around me that are very excited about Bernie Sanders and the things he's been talking about, and it is very positive from a public health standpoint. And you'll notice that the corruption machine has been in full force against his campaign, and the numbers being skewed and electoral fraud. So it's just one more indication that the mafia that basically runs this country, and that is indicative of just about every country, much worse than empires, as I said, is alive and well and will continue to preserve itself at all costs.
I had said on the show yesterday about Bernie, it was just amazing how he was silenced in the media over the last 10 days. It was like poof, just gone, disappeared.
Yep.
And that's the amount of influence. As long as he was, driving ratings, like you said, as long as he was there for them to profit on, it was all good. Now, it was just amazing. The last 10 days, no Bernie on TV. It was pretty shocking to see that development. I wanted to ask you this because you mentioned being an introvert, but now you're the smartest guy in the room, if you know what I mean. And people listen to you now, so you have to not only speak, but they look to you for guidance. How do you deal with that responsibility when this isn't really who you are?
Well, as best I can. I've become a little bit more reclusive in the past few years. There's kind of an arc to all this because I feel like I've said pretty much everything that needs to be said in the sense of motivating others, and not in an active sense, but in an intellectual sense. After dozens of lectures and going on, 2 books and of course the films and a lot of other things that I've been in preparation for, I've been I've been retracting a little bit from public interviews, as you know, when you're trying to lure me into this interview. It took me a little while, and really I focus on the creative media. To me, it's less about me doing interviews at this point than me doing what I think is my strong suit, and that is developing creative media. What got me into all this was an inadvertent performance piece where I said what I thought, and I continue to stand by that general communicative ethic. So I'd much rather spend my time working on projects that will be out there for digestion in an artistic sense. And as I've often said, art is really important in this type of development and activism because it has a secret, unique way to kind of get behind people's ego and not make them feel as threatened. When I give talks or interviews and I start talking blatantly about the things I'm interested in and want to see, people get, their hair stands up on the back of their neck pretty quickly because they're just so alienated by the direction. But I have much better luck with the arts. So you'll find over time I'll be doing much less in terms of lectures and interviews and much more in creation of informative works.
And that's really interesting. Do you find yourself now having to choose your words a little more carefully because people are listening?
I just definitely feel a heavy responsibility when I get tons of emails and really heartfelt stuff, and people want to see their kids grow up in a better world and so on. And it can't help but feel that gravity. I'm not irrational enough. I'm certainly not overly confident enough to think I have some kind of position where I can, quote, change the world. I'm far too conservative in my own mindset. My view is let's just let whatever happens. I'm just going to be honest, and I respond as best I can. But I do try not to let the gravity of all the problems of the world weigh too much on me. But if you knew people that were close to me, they would probably say that I walk around with a pretty nasty frown most of the time, and my blood pressure probably is a little bit too high. But I'm working on that.
Yeah, and but you can't deny, or you can't be in denial of what has been created here. That it is a responsibility, and does it weigh you down, or do you just choose to disconnect?
I work on disconnecting on a certain level. I was growing up, my values were very much groomed by George Carlin, who doesn't get enough credit as a social commentator.
The best, the absolute best.
Yeah. So one thing I always had a cognitive dissonance with him, even though I appreciated all of his angles, was his view that he was just going to let the society, circle down the drain. His final view was of the failed idealist, and he often talked about it, that the only way he could deal with the problems of the world and his disappointment with society was to detach from it emotionally. And I sort of hated that when you talk about it. But over the course of the years, as a general strategy, I've sort of come to appreciate that. Because he's not trying to dismiss the need for change. He's trying to save his own emotional stability. He's trying to maintain his own emotional integrity. And anyone, again, that digests and takes the time to really look at the state of the world, it weighs on you very much. So I kind of take that Carlin-esque sense. I try to look at things like it's a TV show, like I'm not really involved on a certain level. I certainly try not to take myself that seriously when it comes to, I don't know how to say this either, when it comes to really serious things that people get me involved in, or if I get invited into something that's really big, I automatically talk myself out of trying to be very serious about it. Not that if this makes any sense, not that I'm intellectually in denial, not that I don't believe in what I'm saying, but I try to remove the emotional component that it gets the ego all fired up and, turns things into a fight all too often. So I hope that helps. I have a very unique way of dealing with it. I just kind of look at it like it's an activity that I'm occasionally emotionally detached from. It's easier said than done. But I do generally believe, going back to George Carlin, and he commented on this also in his writing, if you really read him in detail, very profound, much more profound than what he did live. He says that a dispassionate view is the most logical. And I couldn't agree with that more. And that's kind of why he was so on point, because he took a very, in his own mind at least, so he claims, he took a completely detached view, like he was looking at an anthropological experiment of human society. And that's kind of the way I try to look at it as best I can, so I don't get too emotionally stifled.
Well, and I think you started to move towards that by the time you did Moving Forward. And was that a conscious effort to maybe, I don't want to say crack jokes, but maybe be a little bit more light and add a little bit of comedy? Is that even the right word? But it wasn't as serious as, as an ice pick in the forehead like the first film was.
Well, as a communication strategy, comedy I think is good, and that's part of it. I also did Culture in Decline, which was completely based on a satirical kind of view, a very Carlin and Bill Hicks influence. I wanted to just turn the tables and just kind of make fun of things, well, of course, keeping a positive intent, not dismissive of society, but just kind of make the audience feel shamed a little bit. You know what I mean? make the public feel, and even those that are perpetuating this system on the higher echelons, make them just begin to realize what they're doing and the dehumanization that they're actually extending. And I don't know if that tactic is super effective, but I will say that my new film trilogy, Inner Reflections, is based on a similar type of motto, even though it's not comedically oriented. It uses kind of a hindsight way of viewing the way we are now from the future, and I'm hoping that tactic will kind of break some molds of the audience who watches it. So.
It's funny that you brought up Bill Hicks, because we all know Carlin, and he's truly the greatest, but Bill Hicks was on point, and I wish every day that he was still with us.
Yeah.
But Bill Hicks was on the money, wasn't he?
Oh yeah, he's Carlin, Hicks, Richard Pryor, and Lenny Bruce are the four real beacons. They were in the 20th century the philosophers. We moved away from these overly heady people writing extensive books, and John Locke and Thomas Hobbes and all their strange, usually establishment supporting biases, to this new counterculture that came in the form of comedy. And again, going back to the arts, what made them so effective, and even when I think back on it, and I go back and review some of the stuff that I used to listen to years ago, I'm continually amazed at how this kind of stuff became part of my value system, even when I didn't completely understand what they were even talking about. So therein lies that power of kind of a detached artistic expression. So I really like that. That's why I am so in favor of the arts as a powerful tool of activism and change.
I'm going to flip you out right now. There is, and you can actually Google this, there is some urban legend out there that Bill Hicks faked his own death and recreated himself as Alex Jones.
Yeah, I know. I saw that one.
Okay, all right.
Yeah. I guess I'm offended by that. Because
right.
The two people are in such stark contrast to their humanity that I think that's a little bit of an insult towards Bill. But.
Well, if you squint your eyes just enough. Just enough. Okay, now let's talk about the movement and where it is today. It started to take off and catch ground. 2008 and the later part of 2008 certainly was out of control. Where is it today? And are you happy with where it is today?
Well, that's a relative consideration. From the standpoint of most grassroots movements, like say Occupy, they come really fast, they hit, they're popular, and then they fade into oblivion and basically don't exist anymore. They stand as a link in a chain that usually influence other organizations that eventually pop up. Occupy, as probably the easiest example, is more of a cultural meme now than it is an organization, even though I'm very good friends with people that are still very much involved in the movement, but it doesn't have that kind of presence that it once did. The Zeitgeist Movement, on the other hand, because we started with a very specific organization through periodic and annual event days, through a chapter structure that's very deliberate, through meetings and projects, and we've been very consistent for going on 8 years now, it has survived this temporal wave, and we've stabilized. We aren't as popular as we were in 2011, that's for sure.
Right.
I mean, it was just huge. Like, it was crazy. And then, we stabilized down. And now we're actually working to develop in different ways. Believe it or not, the movement just went nonprofit. So the Zeitgeist Movement is of course a grassroots organization with international chapters across the world. But centered here in California, we made the decision to create what is effectively a global administration that now is a legal 501c3 nonprofit. So we're entering into the establishment very slightly in order to improve things, because I hate to say it, it's very expensive to do the kind of things that we try to do. At the end of this fall, we're going to try and have another media festival, hopefully. I don't know if you were ever aware of these media festivals or if you ever were able to attend one, but they're a lot of fun, but they're very hard to put on because of the time and energy and expense to do a major theatrical kind of all-day event. So this is going to help us a little bit. So we're actually taking a little turn. It's a little nerve-wracking. I was against any kind of monetary involvement in the movement. Again, it's pretty astounding that for 8 years we literally had no donation structure. I mean, it was all done by a small group of people funding this and that, and we still maintain consistency and momentum. We had our last event day in Greece, in Athens, which was quite apt considering the austerity that Greece has been hit with. So, things are progressing. I'm content with it in comparison. I mean, obviously, I want to see more action. I want to see more galvanization. It's very hard to do that given everyone struggling to try and survive. So
with the Zeitgeist and that movement, that's a bit different than the Occupy movement. And hear me out for a second. At least with Zeitgeist, there's a list of principles in front of us, and everybody can read and watch and study and so forth, and it will continue to propagate. But the Occupy movement, the reason why it never established itself and found support is because I don't think in general anybody knew what it was about. And I don't think that the occupiers themselves had a foundation and a platform. I think it was confusing to everybody. And if you went up and asked somebody in the Occupy movement what they were there for, big banking. Well, okay, but what do you mean by that? You know what I mean? And I just don't think that there was a solid foundation for them to present to the rest of the world, as opposed to Zeitgeist, where you've got plenty of stuff to talk about.
I agree. The central meme of "we are the 99% alludes fundamentally to socioeconomic inequality. If there's anything that I would associate to Occupy, it was the global recognition of this grand inequality that, of course, continues to grow because of the fundamental mechanisms of the market system. So that I agree with you entirely, though, from the standpoint of stated principles and a mission, which again is why I separate the two. I have a lot of friends in Occupy. I think it's great. To me, it was more of a needed temper tantrum, like an explosion of society. And the way this is settling, my hope is it plants lots of other seeds, man. We need to. It's not just about the Zeitgeist Movement. We need multiple groups coming together with their version of what they think the future should be. Because I'm convinced that when you follow this kind of train of thought about what sustainability and public health means, and having true freedom and a democratic participation, and having people not be oppressed, as has been historically the case, when you follow the train of thought that links all those things together, you end up on the same road. And that is this road, as I said, that leads to a post-scarcity foundation of the system that basically makes the kind of elitism and oppression and poverty and all of that and inequality, it makes it non-existent by structural default. It can't emerge because the system doesn't allow it to. It's not designed that way. So that's my 2 cents on that one.
Yeah, well, what happens in in your version of the future with simple things such as paper currency, money, credit cards, the stock exchange, the general idea of banking and loaning money. What happens to all of that?
That would go away as an outdated, customary approach that's no longer needed. In the same way, we don't have complete abject slavery anymore. We have an advanced version of it, but there's tons of social customs that we've had in the past that aren't here today, and that would be another set of them. They wouldn't serve the role anymore of an economic role. In fact, they're not really economic anyway. The true definition of an economy is the intelligent organization, sustainable organization of resources and how they're utilized to satisfy what needs to be an intelligent population that understands the limits of its own existence. There's this general propaganda that comes from the free market culture that says, well, humans are just irrational. They want everything. We can't possibly organize in any kind of design-oriented sense because humans will forever want more and more. We saw this kind of really enforced, I think, and it had a much more stronger cultural effect than people realize in the movie Wall Street, when Michael Douglas's character stands up and says that greed is good. And then he starts to list all of these irrational things, emotional things to it, such as greed for love and greed for art and greed for knowledge. And those are not equivalent to the greed for material possessions at all.
Right.
And I see this general rhetoric underline almost every single person I argue with that is loyal to free market ethics. The truth is, if you want an intelligent society, it has to understand its place. You have to understand that you can't consume more than the world produces. And if you want And again, going back to that train of thought, and if you want stability, you don't want crimes and gangs and property rights violations and terrorism and war, then clearly you have to create an environment that takes into consideration the well-being of others. So social concern is really based on self-interest. Our self-interest must be social interest if we expect to survive the next few decades, given all the destabilizing forces on the table right now, which there are plenty. And no time in human history, for all those out there that are anti-war, no time in human history has any war that's happened been based upon resource unavailability in the sense that we're seeing now on the global level. There's never been, say, absolute water scarcity or absolute energy scarcity that forced one country to go and invade another one because of the global relevance. We are now inching into a period where all of this overshoot, all this biodiversity loss, all of these emerging scarcities consequential of our flagrant economic behavior are emerging. And that is why the governments of the world are loading up. China, Russia, and the U.S., they are waiting. They are not relenting at all with their arms development. And this is quite frightening. So the tables are going to have to turn because the next war is going to be for real. It's not going to be like World War II, which was just a big ego expression. It's going to be for real resources and real mass group survival. And that's, again, terrifying.
With locally sourced and a change of a distribution network and everything is equal, we produce what we need and we move towards that. I have to ask you, what happens to something like Captain Crunch?
Well,
do you understand what I'm saying? I mean, you know.
Well, let's step back and think about what it means to have access to resources that serve our interests. If you had an open source environment, you have a way to democratically balance the interests of a population because they're going to be involved in development. This is an extended conversation, but the way things will materialize in the future won't be, say, a marketing company that develops a product called Captain Crunch, and then they buy advertising revenue and they target a certain probably child demographic, right. And then they saturate the kids' cartoons with this advertising week after week, right. And then suddenly you grow up with a culture that somehow appreciates Captain Crunch. Instead, it comes the other way around. Just like any good production, the public actually thinks of things it is interested in, that it wants, and ideally, of course, losing this vain branding stuff. I mean, branding is a complete contrivance. Why we have it, I have no idea. It's terribly distorting that we associate handbags and cars to brands, and then we value them based on the brand and not what the good actually does. So that's a standard modern sociological neuroses. That's
a $5,000 purse just boggles the mind.
Oh, it's absolutely unbelievable. When I used to work as a cater waiter, when I first got out of school and I was struggling to survive, I was a cater waiter, and I was one of those guys that gets bussed around to the 1% events. It was all political parties. And you wouldn't believe the decadence that I saw when I was like 18 years old. Just mesmerizing in New York City. You're surrounded by homelessness, and then suddenly this party happens that they spent $2 million on, and they give little bags of gifts to all the people that come that are worth, $20,000. It's just unbelievable. So sorry, I went on a tangent there.
That's fine. I'm listening.
But anyway, so back to my point about development. If you get rid of all that neuroses and all those material associations and look at goods and services as literally something that helps you and that helps your family, helps your community, and enables you to live a high quality of life, you can create that interaction in a digital realm where everyone contributes to product design and development. People already do this on a certain basic level, as I said, with open source, but with more advanced CAD work and engineering programs where you can literally imitate gravity. There's amazing interface developments and technology for engineering that enable engineers to do an incredible amount in the digital realm. And to me, that's the beginning of what is going to be a fully democratic economic system. It's participatory economics. It's something that has never existed and eventually will. And once that happens, it's going to be self-generating. There will be, if someone wants to make a car and they want to design it in their own style, well, let's think about what a car is in style. That's the facade of the car, right? It doesn't really, if the car's integrity is the machine itself that you want to work as good as possible, then that is going to be very limited in what's needed. As far as the visual is concerned, that enables, with 3D printing and other mechanisms, you can have people customize their own cars in 2 seconds. I mean, this has been talked about, and this is nothing new, I'm saying. People are doing this already. It's just not in the procedural realm where people can actively get involved in development and outputting. And just to extend that logic a little bit more, when you get to 3D printing and you get into this more with less ephemeralization phenomenon, instead of having big machines that produce all this stuff, it's going to get smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. And it's feasible to assume that in your home you could have a 3D printing type of machine that can produce most of the things that you generally need, from clothes to domestic items. And eventually it will come to a point, if anyone follows the amazing exponential development of digital technologies, it will come to a point where this dematerialization will be able to produce things like computers and phones with virtually no real resource input coming from things like nanotechnology and other type of developments.
Yeah.
So if you analyze that trajectory, you see where we're going. And our goal now is to maximize and speed up that process. And unfortunately, everything is standing in the way of it as far as our general economic system.
Yeah, the distribution system is the breakdown of everything. If you stop and think about the waste that is involved in that, in general.
Yeah.
Now, but I enjoy a V8, a big American V8. I enjoy that. I don't want to give that up.
What makes you think you have to?
Thank you for that. Okay. All
right.
I
mean, consider it. I mean, if you have this kind of diversity in production, customization, like in the most ideal circumstance, goods are custom made on demand. So it's no more a company that produces tons and tons of machines or whatever, computers, and then suddenly they sit on a shelf and they have this overrun and they have to wait and then to sell them off. That's going to be a thing of the past because that leads to waste. Eventually, for a good amount of items, not all of them, some things like food, that's a whole different process. But most items can be made on demand. At least that's going to be what the future will prescribe. Where if you need a computer, then you go into a system and you get it made on demand and it's brought to you basically or shipped to you, and there's all sorts of ways. And I've talked about this at length. If anybody wants to read a huge treatment that isn't so general, you can get the book, and you can also download it for free, but it is available in paperback, called The Zeitgeist Movement Defined, Realizing a New Train of Thought. And the entire half end of this section is all about the systems approach to engineering that can streamline this type of production. But my point about your customization concept, if this type of liquid drink is what you're interested in, chances are other people are going to be interested in it as well. And therefore, there's demand for it. Therefore, it can be put into the supply chain. It's really just as easy as that if you have the technical structure set up.
Our guest tonight, Peter Joseph. Peter, I'm going to get you to hang on for about 10 minutes of overtime. We can't end here.
Okay.
But I do have to break for a commercial. Our guest tonight, Peter Joseph, the Zeitgeist Movement. When we come back, I've got to ask Peter about religion and where does religion play in this future of the Zeitgeist Movement. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Our guest tonight, Peter Joseph. Everybody stay right there.
And you are listening to my boy, Jimmy Church, on JimmyChurchRadio.com.
Despite popular opinion, reading a book will not make you smarter.
But listening to Jimmy Church will.
Does your basement or crawl space have a damp, musty smell? Well, watch out. That's a sign of too much moisture and not enough ventilation. And that can mean increased mold growth and the buildup of harmful toxins and gases. Don't bother with a dehumidifier. It just circulates the same unhealthy air. Now there's a better way to remove these dangers and odors. It's with the computerized wave ventilation unit that reduces moisture and expels pollutants.
We replaced our old dehumidifier with the wave unit, and in only 3 weeks, our basement is dry and the musty smell is gone.
Wave ventilation requires no maintenance, no buckets of water or filters, and costs only pennies a day to run. Breathe better, live healthier with an affordable, no-maintenance wave ventilation unit. Call 888-618-WAVE, 888-618-WAVE, or visit mydryhome.com. mydryhome.com.
Ride the wave. Wave Home Solutions for a healthy, comfortable home.
What's up, Fadernauts? Studio Dome loves Fade to Black and the F2B audience so much that they have put together the ultimate stereo Bluetooth system. They've done it just for you. Man, check this out. The Studio Dome SBB2 stereo system is here. It's featuring 2 Studio Boombox 2 SBB2 wireless Bluetooth speakers, packed in its own custom hardshell case. This Studio Dome system features the very latest in stereo Bluetooth technology. The 2 full-range boomboxes are in true wireless stereo. You've got to hear this. It's amazing. It's just $129 and use the promo code JCRTWS and you'll also get free shipping. It's simple. Just go to JimmyChurchRadio.com, click on the Studio Dome banner. Go Beckley Teppy.
This is Kristen, Erica, Brittany, Gabby, and you're listening to JimmyChurchRadio.com.
It's not a lifestyle we chose. We were born this way. KGRARadio.com.
This is KJCR at JimmyChurchRadio.com.
All right, welcome back. Fade to Black. Wow. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Our guest tonight, Peter Joseph, director of the Zeitgeist films. And apparently, Great Britain is going to leave the EU with 51% of the vote. How do you like that, Peter? That's pretty interesting.
Oh, it definitely is. I'm curious to see the fireworks.
Oh, man.
You know what I find interesting about the whole kind of detachment? I mean, I think trade agreements are very despotic, and I warrant against any kind of unified trade agreements because they always abuse the weaker countries and the country's population. But when it comes to trying to get people to work together on a fundamentally political level, such as the EU attempted to do, to see this kind of breaking apart is really a sign of the times, because if you might notice, there's an increase in xenophobic rhetoric across the world.
Total.
There's a lot of fear, and that's what people do. That's why you have Donald Trump as popular as he is, because he's catering to a subculture of people that they don't know anything else but fear, and they think having a protectionist and basically an elitist worldview is what's required. And that leads us into, again, a sad and unproductive place. And the more that we see pressures with, the 60 million refugees, the more we see these economic problems and unemployment, which are not going to get any better because technology is now cheaper than human labor. This kind of stuff is going to be pervasive. So you can add that to the list of future things to look forward to as we inch towards about 2040, 2050, which is what I peg as the intersection of a grand number of problems that, once in synergy, are going to be really catastrophic. And I think that's all I could say. There's nothing positive over the course of the next few decades. The only positive trend humanity has, the only positive trend, is our economic ability to create an abundance. And the question is, will we harness that? Will we be willing to shift as fast as possible to create a sustainable abundance to alleviate all the pressures that are growing and looming?
You know what's really crazy to me, speaking of abundance, is just walk in the back of a restaurant or a grocery store and what they throw out every single day.
Oh, it's truly unbelievable. There was a statistic that said, I think it was 30 to 50% of all food produced ends up as waste.
Waste.
Yeah.
I mean, and that is not imagination. This is a reality. And there is no excuse to have anybody in this world go hungry. I have, right? And there's just no excuse for it. And then I find myself, Peter, I'll admit that I'll go into a supermarket and pick through tomatoes to find one that doesn't have a mark on it, right? And how insane is that? I mean, how insane is that thought? And I freely admit that I do it too. And there's no excuse for it. It's shameful.
Well, I mean, our culture is based on scarcity. In an individual sense, you're required to have a self-preserving strategy. You self-maximize and you self-preserve. If you didn't do that on some basic level, you would suffer and you'd be poor and you would, suffer all the economic consequences that we see with the great majority of people on the planet, even though they aren't trying to do it. It's just the nature of how the system is dealt their cards. But that's the thing about way our self-interest has been groomed by the current socioeconomic structure, is we're forced into this selfish behavior, this narrow-sighted self-interest. And it's not that we want to see other people suffer, or if we want to, degrade. It's just the way you have to behave.
Right.
And that's why I keep emphasizing that until we change that mechanism, that orientation, that need to be that way, which requires an entire social system transformation, this narrow-sighted, blinders on kind of selfish behavior is just going to persist, and it's going to be the end of us. It's the individual actions that create the problems in the world. It's not necessarily a hierarchical elite. They're there, and they do control because they want to preserve themselves like any good mafia does. But the real detriment, the real people that are messing up the world, are doing it by necessity because that's the way our system is organized. It's all about exploitation of your given circumstance. And that's a terrible value system to have.
To some degree, there has been a response to not necessarily the Zeitgeist Movement specifically, but public's perception. And I'm speaking about GMOs. And Monsanto and the other big producers and agriculture have started to respond to this, and we see this now with the non-GMO packaging labeling that is going on. But their response to it isn't because non-GMO is better. It's that non-GMO is a way to make money. It's interesting how it kind of feeds into itself, isn't it?
Well, if the market sees value in it, meaning the psychology of the market, and people can make money off of what is differential advantage, that's what you just described. Just people doing something different. Then that in a sick way, sometimes good comes from that, but that's a side effect. That isn't the intention.
No, it's not at all. It's only money driven. That's it. That's it. The response is money driven, has nothing to do with health or the future of humanity.
Nope.
Now, going back to the first, 10 or 15 minutes of the first Zeitgeist film, obviously, you've made some very valid points about religion. But how does religion play into the future, and how does it play into your own life?
Well, I guess if you're talking about theistic religion, obviously religion can be considered a philosophy, so I would separate more more value-oriented religious thought in the philosophical sense, such as, say, Buddhism. Those are patternistic, ritualistic religions that they're looking to create familiarity and comfort with certain ideas, values, and patterns. And I think there's something to be said about humans and rituals and patterns. There's something about that kind of repetition that seems to be healthy for people. That's, again, my own kind of sociological assumption. But that aside, when I think of religion, I think of theism. So you're talking about gods in the sky and controlling and somehow in this paradox of free will, people are supposed to be behaving their own way, but yet God has control. And there's just this complete and utter ridiculousness that is just fundamentally superstitious. And it goes back to a period of time where people didn't know what they were looking at. They looked at nature and they didn't understand it, so they made up stories about it. And then those stories slowly became transformed and anthropomorphized. Because, again, as I described in the first section of Zeitgeist, you have this kind of pagan nature worship, which you saw in Greek mythology and lots of other religions across the world. And slowly the ideology around this nature worship, which makes perfect sense, got molded into authoritative personifications, such as Jesus or any of these other characters, or even just the conception of the male white god that we have been hearing about for so long. So it's a social control mechanism. On that level, I don't have any sympathy for it. I have sympathy for the people. I look at religion when I meet somebody that's deeply religious. It's clothes that they wear. I see them as wearing a hat. That's all. I don't condemn them. I'm not an intellectual bigot. I have plenty of good friends that still have religious values and they go to church, and I don't condemn them for that in a broad sense. I want to make that clear. A lot of people really thought I was some atheist lunatic that was super hating on religion. I look at it as a development, and I hope that through the rational development of science and technology and basic knowledge and education, that the Judeo-Christian Islamic philosophy can start to turn around. It is no coincidence that Islam is the fastest growing religion, because they're also the most intellectually underexposed. Excuse me. There are less books translated into Arabic than were translated into Spanish. There are less books translated into Arabic over the course of the past century than were translated into Spanish in the past 5 years, if that statistic makes sense. Wow. In other words, there's very little education happening. It's a very closed-off culture, and that's why this superstition is continuing to prevail so strongly. So, it's something that as a society we have to contend with. And when I compare the two, because I know a lot of people that are really heavy to talk about the destructive nature of religion, and they want to focus on it. And I say no. If you really want to focus on social change, focus on the economic issues, because I guarantee you that the moment any individual or group has extreme scarcity, they are going to put down their Bibles and Qurans and pick up a shovel to plant food very quickly. So your survival is going to be contingent upon economic means, not your religious identification. And I think this transformation will eventually happen, where people will become more scientifically minded as they begin to learn more about what actually supports them. That's all I can say about that.
And we'll end on this, kind of a fun question. But, I know you're a pragmatic black and white guy, and I get that. But have you ever seen anything strange in the sky that you can't explain?
Like what?
A UFO.
I've seen footage of what appears to be UFOs. The problem, have I personally seen it live? No, I can't say I have. I mean, I'm fascinated by the subject. I've often joked that if we finally did get visited by UFOs and it was very apparent, it would finally give humanity that sense of unity that it really, really needs.
Bingo.
I'm not saying that it needs to be a threat from UFOs, but it would finally be that ultimate evidence that, yes, it's a human family and it's one species, and maybe, hopefully, if we are visited, they would help us. Considering they would likely be much more advanced if they're going to transverse to make their way here. So yeah, I'm fascinated by the subject. I love Carl Sagan and his poetry towards seeking extraterrestrial life. But I can't say I know for sure if we've been visited. There's definitely a lot of speculation out there, but it's interesting.
Yeah, and with your religious presentation in the first film, I've often thought that all of those ancient cultures, the way that they've always had, the gods coming from the stars and angel, everything came from up there and down. It just maybe they saw something strange in the sky or had some type of interaction back then, and the only way to explain it throughout history and through mythology is it's a god, right? It's an angel.
Sure.
And there's a strong possibility for that because, if I was hanging out 5,000 years ago, I don't know how I would explain it to my family, when I came home after hunting all day, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, the logic would gravitate towards something like that. Again, going back to that predisposition to try and seek answers, and where there are no answers, you just make things up. We remember that medieval painting that has the Madonna, and then there's a big flying saucer in the back
with a beam of light coming out of it.
So that is truly fascinating. I also am aware of some cave paintings that have similar symbologies. So I don't rule any of that stuff out. I kind of wish it would finally come to the surface if there is any kind of observation happening, because I'm getting kind of tired of all the speculation.
Yeah, me too. Absolutely. Now, really quick before we say goodnight, what's the best way for everybody? You've got a few different websites out there. What's the best source for everybody to go to?
Well, they all have different purposes. If someone wants to see the film trilogy, they can go to zeitgeistmovie.com. There's the movement, which is the zeitgeistmovement.com. There are other websites for my coming trilogy called Interreflections, and that's interreflectionsmovie.com. There's also cultureanddecline.com. There is a number of parallel websites that support the movement too. There's a Zeitgeist Media Festival. There's Zeitgeist Arts Project. There's a lot of stuff. So that all has gateway stuff if they would go to zeitgeistmovement.com. But generally speaking, I'll promote the Zeitgeist Movement. So the zeitgeistmovement.com, please visit.
And are you speaking any events or anything that's happening soon?
Not soon. I've been buried in this one book and then in the film. And I have, this is my exception for the moment. I'm really hunkered down trying to get stuff done.
I want to thank you for coming on tonight. It was a lot of work to get you here, but I hope you had a great time, and thank you for sharing the information.
Oh, absolutely, Jimmy. I really appreciate it, and we can chat again in the future. We'll find another time.
Oh, and I have to do this with you on the air. I have to thank Dan for hooking us up. So there you go. I've done it. Thank Dan.
Thank you, Dan. Zook. Yeah, absolutely.
You got it. Thank you so much.
All right, take care, Jimmy.
You got it, Peter. Peter Joseph, everybody, Zeitgeist. Now, we do have some links up for Peter over at jimmychurchradio.com. There's a few links there, but like Peter just said, there's gateways to everything for Peter. And now it's important for everybody to kind of digest a little bit about what Peter is trying to do. But I need to emphasize that he was just a musician, that was exposed to the banking system and trading, which he did do. We didn't talk much about that tonight. But in his experience on that side is what caused him to realize that the system was broken. And when somebody speaks like he does and presents these ideals that he does, it came from his own personal experience. It didn't come from opinion, watching a documentary, armchair research. Okay, he was actually there. and he was involved in the banking system, and he was trading and dealing with commodities and fractal banking. And that's where this all comes from. And it's fascinating to go in and actually do the research. Do watch, if you haven't seen Zeitgeist, you watch the first film and then watch the other two and watch them in a row. And you can watch them all for free. But I suggest that you do, and then take a look at the world around you. Peter Joseph, fascinating conversation tonight, and thank you. I can't wait to get you back on the show. Now, back to the big news. All right, so it appears that the voting is done. And I'm checking this now. 51% of the vote. And is there anything left? I need somebody, somebody call in that's got an actual update, because I've been involved in this conversation tonight with Peter. 323-825-5045. If you guys know exactly what's going on with Brexit, and is the voting, is this it? Is it too close to call, or is it done? 51% of the vote. What does this actually mean? I wish we had a show tomorrow, because when it comes to Great Britain and, being separated by water from Europe, always been, on their own thing. And I get that, the pounds and inches and not going to the metric system and all of that, and your ideals and your culture and everything, where you felt like maybe you were losing your identity by blending in and being part of the union. Is that what has driven this? And this is the other part for me, and I really need to talk to somebody from Great Britain. It seemed like, and this is part of the media too as well. It seems like this vote and this referendum kind of snuck up on the world. It was just like, hey, we're going to vote next week. So it's obviously been discussed and debated in Great Britain for a very long time. This isn't something that just happened. But it feels that way over here. We didn't get a chance to even discuss this. It was like, man, we're going to vote tomorrow. What? It seems to me to be very, very, very significant and also a close vote. 51% to 49%? Really? That's division. It's not 90%. So that means in Great Britain right now, your neighbor on either side of you wanted to stay. Oh, man. Crazy. How you doing, Les?
I'm doing great, Jimmy.
Oh, I can't hear you.
Can you hear me?
Now I got you. Speak into the microphone.
Sorry about that.
What was that? You trying to talk to me from the bathroom?
Oh, you never know, Jimmy. You never know.
So what do you think? Well, two questions really quick. What'd you think of the Peter Joseph conversation?
Dude, he was just absolutely fabulous. You get the smartest freaking people on this show. I am just so amazed over and over and over and over again. I learned a lot tonight from Peter.
Have you seen the films?
I have not seen Zeitgeist, but actually I'm going to watch it tomorrow. I've got it on Netflix.
Okay, yeah, you need to watch it. It's pretty good, and now that since you're going to watch it tomorrow, that film came out in 2007, and so you have, which is what I mentioned to Peter tonight, you have now 9 years to digest and look at what that film was trying to say in 2007 and where we are today in 2016. It's pretty interesting how the film now can stand on its own. And Peter mentioned it. It's like, dude, man, that most of the stuff that we talked about, have either come to pass or have been proven. And it's very interesting. I watch the film all the time. I watch it all the time, man. And it's 9 years old. Watched it last week, and watch part 2 and part 3 as well. And then another funny thing to do is just go watch some of the debunking stuff that's out there, because that stuff is proven to be comical. Now, let's get to this Britain exit. What do you think about this? What's going to happen tomorrow?
Well, I do know Japan supposedly had a quirk in their system, and they were shut down for a little while. I don't know if it was a quirk or not, being conspiracy-minded. I don't know, man. I did not take economics in college, and I have no idea what's going to happen tomorrow. But you know what? The fear porn does tend to get to you a little bit. So, Jimmy, basically, what are they doing? They're basically pulling out of the EU? They're going back to the pound? Is that what's going on?
No, they've never let the pound go. But it's all of the trade agreements and everything else that the European Union... now, look, I haven't studied this as much as I should have. But there's other things that come into play. Passports, how the borders are set up, and so forth. There's that aspect, too. Also, the trade agreements that are going on. And also, Mike Barrett just called in. Mike, what's up?
Hey, I'm thinking craft steak in Las Vegas. We'll get the strip steaks, a couple of fillets, and some Budweiser, and have it out. What do you think?
Yeah, but Mike, you just called in to Fade to Black.
I know. I'm just thinking you owe me a steak dinner, dude.
Oh, that's right. I lost the bet.
Yes, you did.
Oh, that's right.
You're the one who pushed the bet. I wasn't.
I did. Well, honestly, I thought that the European Union was something that they all wanted. That's what I thought. Look, I thought that one of the joys of Europe was being stopped at the border 20 minutes after you crossed another border.
Yeah.
And all of the countries had their own identity and their own money and their own things and their own, and to just make it one big country, I just thought, man, I don't know. I think that Liechtenstein wants to be Liechtenstein.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's a surge. I think there's a surge of that going on around the world, that I think that these large bureaucratic establishments that, for instance, Brussels is telling the Brits what size teapots they can, kettles they can build. It's just reached a point where people aren't, they're mad as hell and they're not going to take it anymore. And I think this is just the beginning. I think it's going to start happening in the U.S. this fall, and I think that Britain's going to kind of lead the way on this. So, I'm kind of excited about it myself. In a bigger sense, I think it means that, I favor people choosing their own destiny and choosing their own future. And I think that if they do that, they're happier, So
I agree with you, Mike. And,
agreed.
And thank you for calling in and rubbing my nose in it. But
Rita told me to.
Okay.
Just so you know. Blame Rita. Blame your wife.
Oh, she's
Thanks.
loving every minute of it. Trust me, Mike. All right.
Thanks.
I owe you
Night.
steak dinner. Have a good night.
Night.
Mike Barra calling his chips. I just thought that it was a little bit too radical, to separate, because Great Britain is so frigging important, not only to the EU, but to the rest of the world, and the representation of stability, I think, would have been stronger than dealing with the separation and how you would have to deal with that. That's only that's what I was thinking. But there's certainly much more to it than that, and I know I'm being very simple in that view. But the EU.
Well, sometimes a simple view is best, Jimmy.
Well, they never did. They never did go full in. They never did. They stayed away from the metric system.
They were smart to do so as well. They kept their own currency because their currency was always strong.
Well, there's that aspect, but it's also been around forever, and there's a certain ideology and identification to, a culture and a system that has worked, and they didn't want to give that up either. And I'm with them on that. I always thought that the euro felt funny to me. But it was surprising to me how everybody just jumped on board with it, that they were going to give up so many things that identified them and their own countries. So, and with that, Les, get us out of here, brother.
All right, Jimmy. Special thanks to Peter Joseph and the eminent Jon Rappoport. Fade to Black executive producer is Rita Kamarian. Special thanks to LJ3, that's me, Renee, Jonas, Mark. Thank you, Dennis. Thank you, Brother Bob. Announcers are Steve Harder, Gene Vito, and Mark D. Kovar. Fadey by Dale. Webmaster is Drew the Geek. Music by Doug Aldrich. Intro by Spaceboy. SpaceboyMusic.com. Fade to Black is produced by KJCR for the Game Changer Network, syndication on KGRA The Planet. And for the week, Jimmy and I are
out of here. Thank you so much, Les. Have a great, safe weekend. We'll see you on Monday.
You too, Jimmy. Good night.
Oh, man. I think Les cut himself out. This broadcast is owned and copyrighted 2016 by Fade to Black and the Game Changer Network. It cannot be rebroadcast, downloaded, copied, or used anywhere in the known universe without written permission from Fade to Black or the Game Changer Network. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Thank you, Peter Joseph. Follow me on Twitter right now at JChurchRadio. I want everybody to be safe. Go Beckley Teppy.